Chapter 953. After a long laugh, Dong Qitian began to sob again. From an influential figure who had dominated the world, he had fallen overnight and become a prisoner for many years. The feeling was indescribable. Without experiencing it personally, no words could describe it. Through his teary eyes he saw that Yunyang was still raising his saber and slashing at the stone pillars that imprisoned him, as well as the ones that were buried on both sides of the stone walls. Clang, clang, clang. "Child, what are you doing?" "Cough, the quality of this celestial cotton gold is really good. I'm getting all of them and bringing them back. If I leave them behind, wouldn't I be returning empty-handed from a treasure mountain?" "Ah, this is nothing. You said that the platform below is the spirit sealing platform. Of course it's good stuff too. Bring it back as well. It's understandable that you want to collect the celestial cotton gold and the spirit sealing platform, but who would dig the pillars like you? Why are you so meticulous? Are you embroidering? Or do you have a lot of time to waste?" "What are you talking about? The 4 pillars in these 4 stone walls are obviously not ordinary items. Otherwise, they would have been destroyed by you when you were trying to break free from the celestial cotton gold. Since it's good stuff, of course I have to bring it back. You really don't know how expensive things are until you're in charge. As a sect leader, I'm even poorer now." Yunyang's eyes were sharp. He could vaguely see a few words carved on a section of the chain made of celestial cotton gold that was hidden in the stone wall at the end of the chain. This was the clue. Of course he had to bring it back. If they came looking for him, if he was no match for them, he could just give the chain away. Returning it to its rightful owner, I'm only keeping it safe for Senior. Since the item was returned to its rightful owner, could he temporarily calm down and quell his anger? Perhaps he could pull some connections and work together. The calculations in Yunyang's mind were loud and clear. Of course he could not let Dong Qitian know of his thoughts. Boom. Dong Qitian watched as Yunyang kept everything into his space before the entire mountain suddenly collapsed. The pillars were probably the load-bearing objects of this hollow mountain. Amidst the smoke, the 2 of them flashed out. Dong Qitian's body was still drenched in blood as he grumbled, "Aren't you being too hasty? This cave is entirely supported by those few pillars. If all of them were to rush in like this, the formation will melt. How can the cave still exist?" Yunyang glanced at him and asked in surprise, "Haven't you had enough of this place? Does he still have the intention to stay here? If you really had such intentions, you should have said so earlier." Dong Qitian breathed in the fresh air outside and stared at the bright sky. For a moment he felt refreshed and lost in thought, so he did not hear what Yunyang was saying. He stood at the peak of the mountain for a long time, facing the sun. Finally, tears streamed down his face, but he suddenly burst into laughter and roared into the sky, Dong Qitian. He was out. He's out. I'm out. Ha ha ha. Xinhuang world. Dear opponents, I'm coming out. Did you hear that?" After a long time he finally regained his composure. He turned abruptly to look at Yunyang, his gaze deep. Abruptly he bowed to the ground. "Brother Yun, I'll never forget your kindness in this lifetime." Yunyang was stunned. He had just waved his hand, but before he could say anything, Dong Qitian had already straightened up and said with a chuckle, "I'll only say these words of gratitude once in this lifetime." Then Dong Qitian howled into the sky. Amidst the loud howl, Yunyang saw that the wounds all over his body were slowly healing. Fresh flesh was wriggling and growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, covering the many bloody holes on his body in a short amount of time. Even Yunyang himself had to sigh in awe at such a speed of recovery. As his wounds healed, Dong Qitian shook his head. More than 90% of his long hair, which was hundreds of feet long, was cut off with a whoosh. The rest was coiled around his head. With a casual swipe of his hand, his beard was cut off at the root. The dust and dirt that covered his body were immediately separated from his body and fell off. Seeing this, Yunyang thought that Dong Qitian's tidying up should have come to an end. He did not expect to see him exhale, and suddenly, the entire sky was filled with spiritual qi and wind. With a clap of thunder, a heavy downpour came as if it had been summoned. Of course, Yunyang did not care about the downpour of thunder and lightning. However, the downpour that Dong Qitian had conjured was peculiar. The rain was confined within a radius of a few feet, washing over Dong Qitian's body in a concentrated manner. After a long time, a loud sound was heard. The clouds and rain dispersed and the sky was lit up once more. With a wave of his hand, a soft white robe was draped over Dong Qitian's body. From the inside out he was covered in snow. There was even a pair of boots made of mystical beast skin on his feet. Be it the clothes or the shoes, they all looked rather ancient. Yunyang sighed as he watched. It had only been a quarter of an hour, but the person before him had transformed from a battered and severely injured prisoner into a well-built middle-aged man with a graceful bearing. Now that he looked at Dong Qitian again, he was tall and slender, about a head and a half taller than him. His long legs stood straight on the ground, as if he was going to propel his muscular body into the starry sky. His brows were thick and his eyes were deep. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and there was a faint aura of a ruler descending upon the mortal realm in his movements. Looks like this person was most likely a rare hero before he was imprisoned, Yun Yang thought to himself. Dong Qitian's loud howl had already traveled far away. Silhouettes could be seen moving from afar, flying towards them. It was obvious that they were here to see who had caused such a commotion. Looking at their attire, Yun Yang guessed that they were from Kangwu Union. Dong Qitian stood on the peak with his arms behind his back. His white robe fluttered as he stared coldly at the four silhouettes flying towards him. As the four of them approached, their speed became slower and slower. They were probably hesitating if they should really come closer, so they finally stopped. After all, the cultivation base of the person who had let out the howl was too terrifying. Just as they were hesitating if they should retreat, there was a sudden swoosh. All the trees within 1,000 feet between the four of them, Dong Qitian and Yun Yang, had been uprooted and floated away in unison. At this point, there was no longer anything that could obstruct their vision. Both sides could see each other clearly from afar. It was obvious that the person on the other side was annoyed that the forest was blocking their vision. With a wave of his hand, he had gotten rid of everything like a knife. I want to see you face to face. You want to hide? Why don't you try? The four people on the other side were dumbfounded, as if they had been struck by lightning. The trees, forests, and even the hills that they had relied on to conceal themselves had all disappeared in an instant. There was no time to react at all. Chapter 954. How could an ordinary person do something like this? It was at least beyond the upper limit of their knowledge. How could they not be frightened? Dong Qitian's cold voice rang out. The four of you, come here. His order was naturally accompanied by a monstrous aura that no one dared to disobey. The four of them paled, knowing that the person they were about to encounter was a peerless character. If they did not handle it well, they might end up being crushed into pieces. As thoughts flashed through their minds, the four of them stepped forward cautiously, afraid that they might invite a fatal disaster upon themselves. May I ask what orders you have for us, Senior? This junior is Kangwu Union's? I didn't ask who you are. Dong Qitian said faintly. I'm only asking if this place is still under the jurisdiction of the Sacred Heart Palace? Yes. What year is it this year? Dong Qitian asked. Senior, this year is the 398th era of the Bound of Universe, year 903, the four of them answered nervously. Where did this fellow come from? His ability was unbelievably high, but they did not know what year it was this year. Did this fellow fall from the sky? 398th era of the Bound of Universe, year 903? Dong Qitian murmured, his body swaying uncontrollably. He closed his eyes and only opened them after a long while. A cloud of smoke seemed to flash past his eyes. Yun Yang could distinctly feel the changes that flashed through Dong Qitian's eyes at the moment, as if the world had changed. Understood. You may leave. The four of them left hastily as if they had been granted amnesty. Yun Yang was puzzled. This fellow called us here just to ask what year it is this year? He did not seem to understand. Could it be that some old monster had come into being? Dong Qitian closed his eyes slowly and did not move for a long time, like a statue. Yun Yang did not urge him, merely standing there with him. When I was sealed here, it was the 394th era, year 740. Dong Qitian's voice was calm and even a little cold as he said, it's the 398th era, year 903 now. Yun Yang was stunned for a moment. He could not understand Dong Qitian's words and did not know what he meant. However, he was shocked by what Dong Tianqi said next. An era is 1,000 years? Dong Qitian chuckled. I can't believe I've already spent 4,163 years in this mountain. What a joke, ha ha. He suddenly threw his head back and laughed. However, his laughter was filled with complicated emotions. In the end, it was no different from crying. As Yun Yang was enlightened, he stayed by the side to accompany him quietly. When he was done laughing and his voice gradually calmed down, Yun Yang finally asked, was there anyone or anything in this worldly realm that you couldn't let go of? Dong Qitian shook his head and said self-deprecatingly, who doesn't have someone or something they can't let go of in this mortal world? Yun Yang was speechless, not knowing how to continue the conversation. Dong Qitian spoke again, it's been 4,100 years since I entered and left this place. Even if there's someone or something I can't let go of, even if I can hold on for such a long time, can they? He turned to look at Yunyang and said softly, how many of my old friends can I see now that I've returned? Or perhaps, a few barren graves? A few tombstones? Or perhaps, there's nothing left? Yunyang's gaze was clear as he said, but you're still here. You're here, so why isn't Hope here? Yes, I'm still here, Hope. Dong Qitian stood with his arms behind his back, looking at the sunset. But who else in this world is worthy of my protection? He suddenly howled into the sky, causing the weather to change. Suddenly he hollered like thunder, Zhan Wufei. You're AF * king bastard. Yunyang's heart skipped a beat. Zhan Wufei? The name sounded familiar. Had he heard it before? Isn't that the name of the Sacred Heart Palace's lord? Both of them returned to the east together. Along the way, Dong Qitian remained silent. Sometimes when they passed by a mountain he would stop and fly to the peak to take a look. Then he would descend without a word and continue on his journey. Where to first? To your sect, of course. I'm in debt to someone, I won't be happy if I don't pay it back. Actually, I don't mind if you go home first, Yunyang said slowly after some consideration. Go home first, to see what you're worried about. You've never given up on the hope of escaping. Now that your wish has come true, how would you know that your other hopes have no chance at all? Dong Qitian shuddered, not speaking for a long while. It was only when they had traveled 100 miles that he finally sighed and said honestly, I dare not go back for now. Yunyang sighed inwardly. He could actually understand this sentence that came out of nowhere. The sorrow and vicissitudes of life contained within these few words were already indescribable. Everything was contained within the words that didn't need to be said. I heard from Senior that I've only been imprisoned here for 40 to 50 years. Yunyang forced a joke. But it's been more than 4,000 years. The difference is a little too big. Dong Qitian forced a smile as well. But there's no sun or moon in the cave. Yunyang was about to speak when he saw Dong Qitian suddenly stop in his tracks. Then, he turned his head abruptly and stared at Yunyang with an unprecedentedly sharp gaze. Yunyang could not help but be stunned. At this moment, he felt as if he had completely lost all knowledge of this person before him and the slight sense of familiarity that he had just established. All he could see was a strange smile on Dong Qitian's face. A thick murderous aura emanated from him as he said faintly, Young brother, I'm very grateful that you've saved me, but you've only saved me by chance, yet you're asking for so many things from me. Don't you think I should kill you and end this ill-fated relationship between us as soon as possible? Yunyang immediately felt a great sense of danger that he had never encountered before. He halted abruptly, his entire body on high alert as he replied faintly, Heaven is watching what man does. It's especially so in this bound of universe. If you're not afraid of heaven's punishment, you can try. I'm still very interested to see how the heaven's punishment that has been passed down in the bound of universe is like. Dong Qitian laughed harshly. Heaven's punishment? I've left the mortal world for 4,100 years. I have nothing now. Instead of living an ignoble existence like this, why don't I drag you along with me? Do you think I wouldn't dare? Before his voice echoed in the air, the murderous aura grew thicker, almost solidifying. It was obvious that his threat to drag Yunyang along was not just a bluff, but a threat that could be put into action at any time. Chapter 955. Yunyang made up his mind and retreated immediately. Dong Qitian could be said to be the strongest foe Yunyang had ever faced face-to-face in his life. Aunt May, whom he had faced previously, might have been stronger, much stronger, but Aunt May had never once harbored the slightest murderous intent towards Yunyang. Dong Qitian, on the other hand, was exuding a murderous intent that was genuine. Once he made a move, it would be an extreme killing move. Based on the disparity between their cultivation base and strength, Yunyang might not even stand a chance of surviving even with his manifestation powers. Although the wind and cloud manifestation and the manifestation of the elements each had their own unique uses, such as being invulnerable to weapons and nature, there was still a limit to it. It was difficult for them to be of any use against a super expert like Dong Qitian. This moment had become the most dangerous moment of Yunyang's life. Initially, Yunyang had been filled with joy and encouragement. Not only had he obtained a lot of cultivation manuals from the Kangwu Union, which had greatly filled the residence of Nine Supreme's most urgent shortcoming, but he had also coincidentally obtained the help of a great god. It was as if he had been blessed by God. However, now that the great god had retaliated, it had turned into a death trap. How could he explain this? The great joys and sorrows of life came too suddenly and unexpectedly. They were often shocking and soul-stirring, causing one's guts to crack. However, Yun-yang did not regret it. Perhaps it was too late to regret it now. The more dangerous the situation was, the calmer his mind became. Yun-yang retreated again and again. Other than not using his wind manifestation, he had already increased his speed to the maximum. However, Dong Qitian followed him like a shadow and locked his powerful aura firmly on Yun-yang. He was like a maggot that could not be shaken off. Dong Qitian took a step forward and was almost right in front of Yun-yang's nose. With a condescending look, he said cruelly, "There's no need to struggle. Let's go. When we reach the underworld, we'll still be together. There's no need to worry about loneliness." Before his words echoed in the air, one of Dong Qitian's hands slowly rose. As his hand gradually rose, Yun-yang could only feel the pressure on his body growing heavier and heavier. It was like a mountain was pressing on his head, rendering him unable to move. Knowing that it was a matter of life and death, Yun-yang circulated his mystical qi to its maximum while Emmy assisted from within his primordial spirit. Both of them knew that they were at the final juncture, an unprecedented crisis. Yun-yang's mystical qi was exuberant, circulating at an unprecedented speed. Driven beyond his limits, Yun-yang could even hear the whooshing sound of his mystical qi circulating rapidly in his meridians. The power contained in his body grew exponentially due to the threat of death, advancing layer by layer, reaching its current peak and surpassing it. However, the pressure from Dong Qitian was still unbearably heavy, and the murderous aura was growing thicker. No matter how much Yun-yang tried to increase his power, he could not escape from this heavy threat. On the contrary, he felt that he was being suppressed more and more, and it was difficult for him to turn the tables. Yun-yang knew that he could not be overwhelmed by the threat of death. Circulating the endless divine art to its limit, he unleashed all of his manifestation powers at the same time, intending to fight for a chance of survival. However, the mountain-like pressure had already sealed off the space within 10 feet around Yun-yang. His manifestation powers were completely sealed off, and there was no place for him to use them at all. Relying on the endless divine art to resist the pressure seemed futile. Dong Qitian looked at Yun-yang indifferently. "It's useless. No matter how hard you struggle, the difference in our abilities is too great. All of your tricks will be futile. Surrender and wait for death." "Surrender and wait for death?" Yun-yang suddenly let out a deafening roar. "I, Supreme Cloud, have never been one to surrender and wait for death. Even in the face of heaven and Tao, has Yun-yang ever bowed his head? Who do you think you are, Dong Qitian? How dare you ask me to surrender and wait for death?" Yun-yang let out another roar. The aura on his body that had already reached its current peak increased once again, forcefully squeezing out the potential beyond his limits. He puffed out his chest with all his might, the divine edge appearing in his hand with a loud roar. Boom! An unstoppable, monstrous aura rose from the ground in an instant, sweeping through the surroundings. Dong Qitian laughed when he saw the situation. He retracted his hand and retreated hundreds of feet like a miracle. Standing tall with his arms behind his back, he chuckled and said, "Not bad. Not bad at all." He retracted his hand just like that, effortlessly. All of the pressure, murderous intent, and even the spatial shackle from before vanished in an instant. Peace returned to the heaven and earth. Yun-yang did not feel good after that. He had just raised his aura beyond his current limit and was still unable to control it freely when he suddenly lost his opponent. The mystical qi in his body had nowhere to go, surging like boiling water. Yun-yang felt waves of dizziness in his head. His mystical qi flowed uncontrollably through his entire body, coursing through his 8 extraordinary meridians. The immense external force that Yun-yang had withstood vanished in an instant, rendering the forceful elevation of his mystical qi useless. It flowed in the opposite direction, injuring his internal organs. Blood gushed out of his mouth and nose, and his unstoppable aura stagnated. Then it exploded like a bomb. Dong Qitian seemed to have retracted his murderous intent and the crisis had been averted, but Yun-yang's situation was even more perilous than before. His mystical qi was on the verge of going berserk and self-destructing. Although Emmy had tried its best to channel the qi of vitality and even to guide the rampaging mystical qi, it was like trying to put out a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. It could hardly turn the situation around. Fortunately, a green light flashed above his head. A white lotus bloomed beside Yun-yang, its fragrance wafting into his nostrils as if he was in a sea of flowers. Yun-yang felt his entire body, limbs, and bones sink into an indescribably comfortable atmosphere. It turned out that Yun-yang's 4th-level honor pinnacle ability had suddenly taken a crucial step at this critical juncture. He had advanced to the level of Saint Level 1. Although it was only a difference of one level, a step, it was a distance that was difficult to cross in a lifetime. Apart from the breakthrough, the lingering aura was still rising. Yun-Yang could clearly feel the mystical qi in his body disappearing in the blink of an eye due to the sudden reversal of flow. What replaced it was a completely different mystical qi. The current amount of mystical qi was not much, but the power contained within it was at least 10 times more than what it had been before. The breakthrough of honor to the level of Saint level was an accumulation of quantity and a change in quality. His cultivation base skyrocketed after the breakthrough, but the battle intent and mystical qi that Yun-Yang had accumulated to its peak was still like an arrow on a bow. It had to be unleashed. He could no longer hold it in. It was as if he did not even have to think about it as he swung his saber fiercely, his target Dong Qitian. An unprecedentedly sharp wave of air slashed at Dong Qitian with an unstoppable force. It was a terrifying sight to behold. Chapter 956. Clarity returned to Yun-Yang's mind as realization dawned upon him. It turned out that Dong Qitian's previous actions were mainly to help him take a huge leap forward. Although he had rejected Dong Qitian's condition to help him ascend a level, the man had still resolutely carried out his own idea. He had even used such an extreme method to turn his own domineering power into a massive pressure, causing Yun-Yang to develop the most intuitive sense of danger and survival instinct in the blink of an eye. In the end, he had broken through and reached a whole new realm. This intention was truly well-intentioned, but it was also extremely dangerous. Yun-Yang was already at the pinnacle of honor. What he needed to break through was nothing more than an opportunity, or rather, a trigger. Dong Qitian was well aware of this as well. Otherwise, he would not have proposed such a condition. However, although the trigger sounded easy, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven when it was actually carried out. How many people lacked this trigger and were stuck at this juncture for the rest of their lives, unable to reach a higher realm and experience the so-called feeling of breaking through the barrier between immortal and mortal? Advancing from honor level 4 to saint in mystical qi cultivation had always been a crucial hurdle. It was just like the 4 words, the barrier between immortal and mortal. Once you crossed it, you would be an immortal. If you could not, you would still be a mortal, unable to achieve greatness. Dong Qitian forcefully exerted pressure with his towering cultivation base, pushing out all of Yun-Yang's potential to rebound. Then he withdrew it all at once. He allowed Yun-Yang to break through on his own. Although many people knew about such a method, there were not many in this world who could actually implement it effectively. Yun-Yang could not care less about thanking Dong Qitian now. He closed his eyes and focused on circulating his mystical qi to stabilize his realm, not daring to slack off. After a long time, layers of purple mist rose from Yun-Yang's body, condensing and not dispersing amidst the mountain breeze. It was a marvelous sight to behold. Dong Qitian looked at Yun-Yang. His eyes that were initially filled with relief were now tinged with surprise. Purple mist? How can it be purple mist? Shouldn't it be white mist? What's going on with Yun-Yang? After another long while, the purple mist finally dissipated. Yun-Yang exhaled a long breath. Although it was soundless, there was a faint sound of a dragon's roar that lingered in the air. He slowly stood up. Thank you. Yun-Yang was no fool. He understood Dong Qitian's actions the moment he broke through. This technique could not be revealed in advance and it could only be done once. It was extremely difficult to repeat. Therefore this word of thanks was unnecessary. Dong Qitian smiled faintly, his expression bleak as he said, "You're welcome. I just hope that one day, when you also face some, great enemies, you won't end up like me. The stronger you are, the more powerful you are." Dong Qitian walked forward with his hands behind his back, his voice bleak. The more you can protect, the things you want to protect. That's right. Yun-Yang understood what Dong Qitian was trying to say. In this martial world, strength was everything. No matter how righteous you were, how upright you were, how kind you were, how open and aboveboard you were, right and wrong depended on strength. Justice was only limited to the strong and the weak. Power. Dong Qitian sighed sadly. Ability, if he had the strength, why would he have been imprisoned in this mountain for 4,100 years? Elder Dong, what level of ability did you have before you were imprisoned? Yun-Yang asked curiously. Dong Qitian smiled faintly and said, I've already fallen to such a state. What's the point of talking about ability? He brushed the topic aside with a single sentence. Both of them continued their journey towards the residence of 9 Supremes as they conversed. Along the way they met many people from Kangwu Union, but both of them merely brushed past each other. Yun-Yang knew the inside story, but he did not want to stir up trouble, remaining calm and composed. Dong Qitian, on the other hand, was even more fearless, not taking the few people he met to heart. Other than that, they also met many people who were searching for the raiders of all but God, but those who dared not look for trouble were basically slapped away by Dong Qitian. Along the way, Yunyang did not see Dong Qitian make a second move. It was always a slap. Another slap. A single slap sent the victim flying into the air. Along the way, no matter what the opponent's cultivation base was, a single slap was all it took. It was clean and swift, with no repercussions. Yunyang estimated that the victim would be at least a dozen miles away after the slap, and Dong Qitian would not be responsible for their life or death. If they died, it was the victim's misfortune. If they were lucky enough to survive, they would naturally understand the gap between them. How would they dare act rashly? Such a unique fighting style was another eye-opener for Yunyang. What an expert, far beyond what we can imagine. The residence of 9 Supremes was in sight. Dozens of miles away, Dong Qitian was full of praises as he looked at the imposing base of the residence of 9 Supremes. Not bad, not bad. It seems like your sect is flourishing. Not to mention anything else, just this mountain-protecting array is something this old man has never seen before. It contains a profound theory, a strict law, and a picturesque disorder. The spiritual energy is so rich that it's beyond the imagination of ordinary people. For a sect that has yet to obtain the celestial luck banner, it's truly of top-notch quality. It's rare and precious. Also, the terrain here is good. It's easy to defend and difficult to attack. The peaks stand together, echoing the mountain-guarding formation from afar, complementing each other and increasing its power. It's really not bad. It looks like your sect is really full of talents. Hidden dragons and crouching tigers. You've been whining about being poor to me, saying that there are only a few weaklings in the entire sect. Are you being humble, or do you not want to expose your background? The more Dong Qitian observed carefully, the more he felt that this was not an ordinary place. Although it's a newly founded sect, its providence is solid, and it's vaguely showing signs of soaring into the sky. Since the residence of 9 Supremes has such a name, it must be a sect founded by a total of 9 people, right? Dong Qitian was amazed. You're the leader of the residence of 9 Supremes? Then tell me who was the one who helped you build this property. It's really not bad. I've read it and I'm ashamed that I can't do it if I were in your shoes. Yunyang chuckled dryly. It's just a small foundation, not worth mentioning. Dong Qitian shook his head vigorously. This is just a small foundation? Even the Sacred Heart Palace might not be able to compare to this place in terms of its startup atmosphere. You flatter me, you flatter me. It's passable, Yunyang laughed. Dong Qitian stopped praising when he heard this fellow's boastful tone and glanced at him in disdain. Tell me what you need me to do first. I'll make it clear that there are only 10 tasks. Once all 10 tasks are completed, you and I will be strangers. Yunyang said, there are still 10 people to kill and resources to reach level 3 of Royal Saint. I've seen a lot of people asking why Yunyang was able to kill people back then in the book review and comment section. Let me explain this. Chapter 957. You don't have to tell me that. Those are easier to handle. Dong Qitian said, let's talk about the 10 things first. I need to understand them in advance. Yunyang grinned. Actually, I don't have anything important on hand at the moment. Just some trivial things. The first urgent matter is that everyone's ability in the sect isn't very high. Yunyang was a little embarrassed. The sect needs a chief instructor. Chief instructor? Dong Qitian frowned. We've agreed before that this old man won't be working in your sect. What makes you the chief instructor? Dong Qitian felt like he had fallen into a trap. Yunyang smiled apologetically. Why would I want you to work in my small place? The so-called chief instructor is just a title. You don't have to do much on normal days. You only have to supervise the cultivation progress of the disciples and answer their questions occasionally. When there's no need for supervision, everyone can drink tea, chat, play chess, or even flirt with girls. The more Dong Qitian listened, the more uneasy he felt. He asked with a dark expression, I want to confirm how many days there are when there's no need for supervision? Yunyang blinked and said, it should be very soon. Senior's tenure as the chief instructor is only about half a year at most. If there's anything that senior needs to do in this half a year, it'll be counted as one of the 10 tasks based on consideration. Dong Qitian said with a dark expression, nonsense. Of course, additional work will be included. What do you mean by included in the 10 tasks based on discretion? What do you mean by that? Yunyang felt a little guilty and said, of course. Yes, of course. It was a slip of the tongue. Just a slip of the tongue. Dong Qitian squinted at him suspiciously. You haven't answered my question just now. How many days are there when there's no need for supervision in this half a year? I'm expressing deep doubts about your character now. Don't lower my impression of you anymore. Yunyang wiped his sweat and chuckled dryly. Ah, well, there's actually a lot. Every month you can rest for at least 1 day, cough or half a day. Bastard. Dong Qitian was furious. What's the difference between your arrangement and me selling myself to you? This matter has already cost me almost half a year. Instead of this, I might as well agree to be your protector for 3 years. Wouldn't it be more leisurely to be a protector? Yunyang smiled apologetically. If Senior is willing to be a guardian, we can change the terms right away. Everything is based on Senior's wishes. Whatever Senior says we will do. Why don't we swear to the heavens and change it to a 3-year guardian instead? Yunyang asked carefully, his face filled with anticipation. Dong Qitian cackled and rolled his eyes at Yunyang. Look at how sneaky you are. You must be up to something else. Do you think I, Dong Qitian, will fall for your trick? Do you know the most effective way to deal with a wise man? Yunyang answered instinctively, what is it? Dong Qitian chuckled. I won't follow your wishes and dance with you. Even if you have 1,000 tricks up your sleeves, I have my own set of rules. What can you do? Yunyang acted as if he had been wronged and said, Senior, where did this come from? This junior has absolutely no such intention. By the way, does Senior still have a lot of affection for this junior? Dong Qitian chuckled. Up until now, my affection for you has dropped to 0. It's non-existent. Yunyang's handsome face darkened. What? Dropped to 0? Then why are you lowering your affection for me? Dong Qitian's face tightened as he pointed to the side of the road and said, Young Yunyang, do you see that wild boar? Yunyang was confused. I see it. Dong Qitian snorted. This is my impression of you. If you want me to believe you, that wild boar can fly. Yunyang was exasperated. However, the next moment, Dong Qitian was suddenly dumbfounded. Perhaps the anger in his finger had triggered some sort of threat, but after he pointed, the wild boar suddenly sprung up, and really flew. Furthermore, it was flying at an extremely fast speed. Its cumbersome body created a cloud of black fog in the air. Its 4 clumsy hooves moved back and forth in the air as if it was paddling on water. It was panicking with its tail tucked between its legs. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, it actually flew further and further away. It was as if it was a fish that escaped the net. What the F***ck? Dong Qitian was dumbfounded, his eyeballs almost falling out of their sockets. How could something like this happen? That was a F***king demonic beast. I'm so F***king lucky. Yunyang almost laughed out loud. I've always said that Senior's perception of me is wrong. I've always been righteous, chivalrous, and courageous. Hasn't the truth proved that my words are so trustworthy? Even the heavens are helping me. This is heaven's witness. Dong Qitian was dumbfounded for a long time before he finally hung his head dejectedly. F***ck, you've tricked me. Yunyang laughed and said, Don't worry, Senior. How can I, Yunyang, be someone who expects favors from others? You can trust me with all your heart. I'll never be wrong. I'll trick anyone but you. Dong Qitian chuckled and did not say another word. You won't trick me? Even my conscience is hurting from what I've said. What are you chuckling about? The residence of 9 Supremes may be a newly established organization, but the major domo under me has collected many talents during this period of time. Senior can choose a few disciples from them, to pass on your legacy. Then there'll be a natural legacy in this world. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Dong Qitian did not want to talk to this sly fellow at first, but when he heard the fellow's shameless words that were getting more and more out of hand, he could not hold back his anger anymore. He pouted and said angrily, I'm afraid that I won't be able to refuse to become the residence of 9 Supremes guardian or elder if that's the case. I'll just be a high priest, won't I? Then I'll sell my entire life to you, not to mention 3 years. He tapped a finger on Yunyang's forehead, causing the latter to stagger. You're indeed a sinister one. An ordinary person only has 1 intestine in their stomach, but you have 900 intestines, each of them twisting and turning. They're great ingredients for making 9 turns intestines. He rolled his eyes in frustration. What about the other things? There's really nothing else. At most, it's just a newly established sect. Experts from Celestial Luck Banner sects might come looking for trouble. If there's a time we can't handle it, Yunyang smiled apologetically. With your ability, Senior, you only need to spare some time to supervise your disciples' cultivation practice to send them away, Dong Qitian was expressionless. It looks like I'm not only a guardian and instructor, but also a hired thug. How can it sound so bad? Yun Yang said seriously, with senior in the residence of 9 Supremes, it means that we've obtained the iron pillar that stabilizes the sea, the purple gold beam that supports the sea, the white jade pillar that holds up the sky, and the bound of universe at every turn. Alright, I believe you. Dong Qitian snorted. It's definitely not from your heart. But this is the truth. Dong Qitian snorted and said proudly, with me here, who would look at you in the eye? Even the Sacred Heart Palace. Chapter 958. This is your residence of 9 Supremes? Yun Yang and Dong Qitian had finally set foot on the grounds of the residence of 9 Supremes, but Dong Qitian exploded once more the moment he stepped through the gate. He was still amazed outside, but he was furious the moment he entered. This was because with a sweep of his divine sense, he could clearly see everything in this place. Not only were there no experts here, there weren't even any outstanding disciples that he could bring to the table. Where were the 2 or 3 of them? They were obviously just a bunch of fellows with the cultivation base of an ant. This kind of trash wasn't even considered as an ant in his eyes. Could it be that he was going to be the chief instructor of these people? How was he going to teach them? How was he going to teach them? How was he going to be an instructor? How was he going to coax children with his cultivation base? Dong Qitian's face was almost flattened. Yun Yang said righteously, "What are you complaining about, senior? I've told you from the beginning that the residence of 9 Supremes is just a fledgling establishment. Everything is still at the stage of laying the foundation. Isn't the current state very normal? I believe that when the Sacred Heart Palace was first established, it was also slowly developed from a small sect with nothing. As long as we never change our minds, remain steadfast and persevere, our days will be fruitful." Dong Qitian chuckled. As if I'd believe you, both of them walked to the center of the drill ground. Looking at the 400 to 500 disciples who were practicing, Dong Qitian felt that his future was bleak. There were so many disciples, but not a single one of them had outstanding aptitude. The most talented one was only 7 innately awakened chakras. It was a waste of life for an old man like him to teach such disciples. Little fatty Chen Duo rolled over like a meatball, full of excitement. "Boss, you're back. Who's this big guy?" Little fatty stood in front of Dong Qitian, his head just above the latter's navel. He raised his head with all his might, exclaiming, "So King tall, swoosh." Little fatty's entire body was sent flying far, far away. Dong Qitian, who had slightly vented his anger, retracted his hand and frowned. "There are so many weirdos in your sect. Who's that fatty just now?" Yun Yang was speechless. "It's the major domo of this school that I've mentioned before." Dong Qitian was speechless as well. "How can a piece of this?" The little fatty flew back at the right time and said angrily, "Big guy." Dong Qitian gritted his teeth. Suddenly, a red lotus bloomed above his head, swaying gracefully. Little fatty fell to the ground immediately. His lips trembled and his entire body was like an old sow sifting chaff. Saint. You're actually a saint?" Dong Qitian snorted and rolled his eyes. He shrugged but said nothing. Yun Yang was exasperated. "It's one thing for an almighty being like you to reveal your cultivation to scare a little fatty who's only at the venerable realm, but why the hell are you so smug about it? Is there a need for you to do this? This major domo of mine. Everything in the residence of 9 Supremes is built by him. To the residence of 9 Supremes, his contributions are indispensable." Yun Yang recounted little fatty's contributions one by one. Dong Qitian looked around, his deific consciousness sweeping through all the buildings in the residence of 9 Supremes. When he turned to look at little fatty again, his gaze was a little more solemn. As an experienced veteran of the martial world, how could he not see that this little fatty had built the prototype and framework of a super sect for the residence of 9 Supremes? At least in the short term, the foundation of the residence of 9 Supremes did not need to be added. What followed was to wait for the decision-makers and higher-ups to fill in the framework. In addition, there was a lot of space left to be filled, further enhancing the sect's potential. It was truly far-sighted and ingenious. If he were to ask himself honestly, Dong Qitian felt that he might not be able to build the framework to this extent even if he was given a year's time. This little fatty turned out to be a rare talent in planning. It was hard to come by. Not bad. Dong Qitian's compliment lightened Chen Duoduo's bones. His chubby face bloomed like a flower. You flatter me. Not at all. Dong Qitian looked around and said with some regret, "The foundation of the residence of 9 Supremes has been done very well. Now, it looks like you're really just lacking experts to hold the fort and the backbone. To put it simply, you're probably lacking top-level experts, middle-level management, disciples who can serve as a bridge, and talented seedlings at the lower levels. That's probably all you're missing. Dong Qitian said, "It's a pity that without these, it's obviously impossible for a sect to grow and thrive. Everything before us is but a tree without water. How can it continue?" A faint smile appeared on Yun Yang's face as he said, "Senior Dong's concern is insightful, but it's not a problem for the residents of Nine Supremes." "Not a problem?" Dong Qitian looked at Yun Yang. This fellow's boasting is a little too much. This was a big problem for any sect. Moreover, they had to be of utmost importance. Yet, from the mouth of the leader of the residents of Nine Supremes who had just established a sect, it was not a problem. Where did his confidence come from? "I'll wait and see," Dong Qitian said faintly. "However, I'm not interested in being the chief instructor of these so-called disciples. Instead of being an instructor for these people, I'd rather suffer the heavenly Tao's punishment directly. It'll be more satisfying." "You'll be very interested, I promise," Yun Yang said confidently. Dong Qitian went to the small yard that Yun Yang had arranged for him to rest. Yun Yang called little Fatty aside. "What were you so shocked about just now? What saint and what saint? What saint?" The little Fatty was trembling, but his eyes were shining. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, Holy Venerable Boss, where did you find such a great Buddha? He's so awesome." "My lord," Yun Yang's gaze was deep in thought. "Have you heard of the name Dong Qitian?" Yun Yang asked. Dong Qitian? Heaven equaling sage lord?" Little Fatty was taken aback. "Heaven's equal?" Yun Yang was taken aback. He's a famous figure from thousands of years ago?" Little Fatty said in a trembling voice. Back then, Dong Qitian was known to stand as heaven's equal. He even enjoyed the reputation of being unrivaled among his peers. His old friends gave him the nickname of Heaven's Equal. How impressive. Yun Yang had an inexplicable feeling that the name was truly majestic and domineering. However, the martial world was rumored to have offended someone. He disappeared overnight and was never seen again. Little Fatty's eyes were filled with admiration. This big guy, he lowered his voice. Heaven's equal? Chapter 959. Fatty gurgled, almost fainting. He shuddered even more violently, his fat jiggling as well. He's my idol. Yun Yang was deep in thought. A supreme saint, eh? Although Dong Qitian's manifestation was that of a supreme saint, Yun Yang had a feeling that he was not as simple as he seemed. Follow me. Yun Yang dragged the distraught Fatty to the warehouse of the residents of Nine Supremes. Fatty was still feeling giddy as he mumbled, "Oh my God. I'm so happy. The residents of Nine Supremes has a bright future indeed. Boss, you're amazing. Cut the nonsense," Yun Yang said. "I'll give you more money. Hurry up and recruit more people." Money? Fatty perked up at the mention of money and regained his clarity of mind. He tossed all thoughts of his idol and supreme saint to the back of his mind, his beady eyes glowing like spiritual jade. Where's the money? Where is it? How much exactly? Yun Yang did not reply and waved his hand. With a clatter, the entire warehouse was filled to the brim with spiritual jade. Lower-grade spiritual jade took up almost 90% of the warehouse. There were still 100,000 middle-grade spiritual jade pieces and tens of thousands of superior-grade spiritual jade pieces. Wow, money. Little Fatty had been feeling the pinch during this period of time. The hundreds of millions of inferior-grade spirit jade that he had obtained from the previous transaction were almost all gone. Just as he was having a headache about how to proceed, he suddenly saw an entire warehouse full of wealth. He was so happy that he was speechless. Fatty touched the spiritual jade pieces around him almost instinctively, tears streaming down his cheeks. This is great, money. I love it the most, the love of my life. Yun Yang turned to look at the other side, unable to bear to see Fatty's money-grubbing look. Don't indulge in it. Go buy people quickly. Buy people? Who are you buying? The little Fatty expressed his confusion. With our current reputation, the chances of disciples coming to us are slim, Yun Yang said. If they don't come, I'll go. You go find those human middlemen. Fatty's eyes lit up. Brilliant. Don't be stingy. Money isn't a problem, Yun Yang said. Buy those good seedlings from them at a high price. The more the better. Yes. There were two main types of human traffickers. One was a pure human trafficker. They specialized in abducting and stealing young children. They would either sell them to gangs of beggars or to brothels. Or they would nurture their own spiritual children and raise them for profit. The other type of human middlemen specialized in collecting seed disciples for sects to select for the sects with celestial luck banners in order to reap huge profits. But no matter which one it was a shady business that was utterly devoid of conscience. As for the human medium that Yun Yang spoke of, it included both of them. He only sought to achieve his goal regardless of the means. You don't have to be stingy with your spending, but you have to limit it. You have to establish a relationship with these human traffickers and buy people from them. Pay attention to the standards. Those with good aptitudes will naturally be taken under your wing. Those with poor aptitudes, give them a sum of money and let them leave. If they don't have a good aptitude for cultivation but have a bright mind, they can be assigned to do odd jobs in the sect. Do you understand? Yes. The more buyers, the better. Don't worry about the cost. Do you understand? Yes. Remember to keep in touch with the human middlemen you've dealt with. The more the better. It's best to establish long-term cooperation channels. Understood. After the channels are established, collect the bounty orders in the name of the residents of 9 Supremes. Pay for the missions of those human middlemen. Bloodthirst flashed in Yun Yang's eyes. 99% of the children who have been sold are destined to be homeless. They have no family, and even if they do, it'll be difficult to find them. Whether it's for our selfishness or for the sect, we can increase our ability and foundation while spending money to save them. However, our deal with them doesn't mean that we agree with their actions. It's more appropriate to kill these heartless fellows one by one. Let's minimize the tragedy of families being destroyed because of the sale of children from now on. Fatty was puzzled. Then we can just kill them after contacting them. Why do we have to collect the bounty and go through so much trouble? Yun Yang was exasperated. If that's the case, you'll only be able to find a few families at most. Those people have always been vigilant. They'll flee the moment they sense something is amiss. Most of them will be hard to find. Why don't we borrow the impression that we're wealthy and let them come to us on their own? Then we'll be able to interact more. Secondly, killing these people is the ultimate goal, but it'll be a pleasant surprise if we can collect an additional sum of money. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, Fatty, we don't call ourselves good people, but we still hope to uphold justice for the world and hope that there's a bright sky for the people. Just like you said, we should do it even if there's no profit to be gained from it. However, you must always remember one thing. What is it? Yun Yang looked up at the sky and said faintly, Justice can't be cheap. Justice can't be cheap? Fatty was puzzled. What? Shouldn't justice exist in everyone's heart? Do you want everyone to have justice in their hearts and be willing to eradicate these beasts? Yun Yang said faintly, the human heart has always been complicated. Once justice can be obtained without any effort, it won't be cherished. Once it's not cherished, the heart of justice and compassion will be used by those with ulterior motives. It might even be distorted, twisted, and kidnapped, leading to the fall of morality and the lack of justice. Now, it seems that collecting rewards to eradicate evil seems to go against one's original intention. However, in the long run, it can guarantee that there's hope in people's hearts. On the contrary, if justice can be obtained without a price, then the day when justice is distorted, twisted, and kidnapped won't be far away. When that time comes, the entire world will truly be without justice, without compassion, and without heroes. When the reward is paid, everyone will sing praises of heroes. No one will say that you've committed a heinous crime by accepting the reward. However, if there's no reward, a mocking smile hung on Yun Yang's face. Justice, we'll starve to death. Qian Duo said in a daze, I know what you're saying makes sense, but I still think that this is too extreme. Perhaps, but it's better to be extreme than to sink into oblivion. Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, Now, it's for the sect's development. Just treat it as something you're doing for the sake of the sect's development. If you don't attribute the reward as a so-called righteous act, then it doesn't matter if it's extreme or not. He looked at Fatty and said, One day when you feel that our sect has grown to a certain extent and can use our sect's power to achieve a harmonious world, you can try using the power in your hands to make justice and compassion free. Fatty nodded seriously and said, If there's such a time, I'll dedicate myself to it. Yun Yang patted his shoulder and smiled without saying a word. His smile was more or less mocking. A faint sigh suddenly came from the small yard where Dong Qitian was resting. Chapter 960. Little Fatty packed up the spiritual jades as fast as he could and categorized the manuals Yun Yang had brought back into the armory. Then he hurried down the mountain with 2 others. Dong Qitian stood at the top of the mountain, watching little fatty leave with a deep gaze. He was mumbling something under his breath. Justice can't be cheap? Justice can't be cheap? Suddenly he heaved a long sigh. The human heart. Early the next morning, Yun Yang was meditating and cultivating, consolidating his newly attained saint-level cultivation base when there was a sudden commotion from the mountain guarding formation. Shi Wuchen was the first to return. Following him were two young men. Both of them were dressed in black, tall and slender, with sharp gazes. They exuded a reclusive and unapproachable vibe. They were equally thin and equally cold. If it weren't for the fact that the two of them had completely different appearances, they would have given off a subtle feeling that they were twins. Boss, this is Serene Soul of Nine Springs Kong Luiyue, and this is Young Master of Dark Mist Shi Bujia. The two men who had returned with Shi Wuchen were the other two members of the Demiurge Flawed 10. Yun Yang looked over and saw both of them greeting him with cupped fists. Is this Lord Supreme Cloud? Yun Yang cupped his fists in greeting. I am Yun Yang, both of you, both of them said at the same time. Both of us are happy to join the residence of 9 Supremes. May I know which Supreme we are? How direct. I haven't even finished my welcome speech. Yin Yang rolled his eyes. As for who is which Supreme, it depends on one's ability. There are only 2 Supreme in the residence of 9 Supremes now. Other than myself, it's Shi Wuchen's Supreme Sword position. The rest is yet to be decided. Shi Bujia said, then there's no problem. It's only fair that we compete and speak with our ability. Both of us have a request. We hope Supreme Cloud will grant it. But Yun Yang said, Led Supreme is the founder of the residence of 9 Supremes, so it should be so. However, what merit does Shi Wuchen have to dare occupy the second position? Led Supreme, please remove Shi Wuchen's title of Supreme Sword and let everyone compete for the position. I believe this is the common wish of everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes. Kong Luiyue's expression was cold. Seconded. I'd be happy to see you. Shi Wuchen was enraged. F***ck, I've gone through so much trouble to invite the two of you here. How can you be so ungrateful and stab me in the back? What do you mean by that? Humph humph, humph humph, we didn't stab him in the back, we did it right in front of him. The two of them were like twins. They crossed their arms in front of their chests, glanced sideways, raised their heads, rolled their eyes, sneered and snorted at the same time. Alright. I'll listen to everyone's opinions. A month later, when everyone has gathered, the first round of the Residence of 9 Supremes ranking tournament will officially begin to determine who will be the Supreme among the 9 Supremes. Yun Yang guffawed. Brothers, train hard for the next month. By the way, I've prepared a chief instructor for everyone. He has high standards and hasn't seen any good disciples to train yet. It's not good to be idle all the time, so you guys can make do with each other. Everyone please hold on. The three of them sneered at the same time. Who dares to be our chief instructor? You can train them, but it's hard to say who will train who. Chief instructor, The three of them had made up their minds that they would find the right opportunity to teach this chief instructor a lesson later. Doesn't being our chief instructor mean that his position is above us? Just this title alone was asking for a beating. How preposterous. Yun Yang coughed and said, training and whatnot? Time will tell. However, if any of you can defeat the chief instructor, you can naturally take his place. The residence of 9 Supremes shall take precedence, and we won't interfere with each other's sparring. The three of them rubbed their palms together, their eyes shining. It was obvious that they had been longing for the chief instructor's title. In the small yard, Kong Luiyue fondled the ethereal amethyst that belonged to him fondly. Although he was still trying his best to maintain his aloof image, the corners of his lips curled up unconsciously, unable to conceal his joy. Shi Bujia, too, was beaming with delight as he caressed the ethereal amethyst. Shi Wuchen rolled his eyes in disdain. Look at you two acting like you've never seen the world. You're an embarrassment to the Demiurge Flawed 10, do you know that? Kong Luiyue snorted and rolled his eyes. Why don't I know what the Demiurge Flawed 10 is? We're beaten up like dogs every day, do we still have the face? Shi Bujia sneered as well. The Demiurge Flawed 10 is an insulting name now. It's rare that you, Shi Wuchen, are so proud of it. You're the weirdo living up to the name Supreme Despicable. Shi Wuchen sighed. Can we stop bickering? Think about our future in the residence of 9 Supremes. What are your specific plans for the future? Shi Bujia sucked in a deep breath. The fate of the Demiurge Flawed 10 as a whetstone has lasted for many years. I've had enough of it. It's just that I didn't have a choice before and had too many concerns, so I dared not speak of life and death. Now that there's a sect that's willing to take us in, of course we'll repay it with our lives without any regrets. However, there's one thing. If the residence of 9 Supremes succeeds in the future, I hope to take revenge on those sects that used to use us as whetstones. I won't let any of them go. Kong Luoyue's eyes gleamed with terrifying killing intent. Shi Wuchen told Shi Bujia, Kong Luoyue has brought his family here. What about you? Shi Bujia flashed a smile that was uglier than a crying face. I'm less troublesome than Kong Luoyue. Just last month, she joined the Heaven Saber sect, and since last month I've become the Heaven Saber sect's whetstone. He chuckled miserably. I have nothing to worry about now. What do you mean by me? Shi Wuchen could not help but fall silent. After a long while, he said quietly, I believe she'll regret it one day. Shi Bujia chuckled and said bleakly, I only wish for no more regrets in the rest of my life. What more can I ask for? Dong Qitian woke up from his meditation. With his divine sense, he had already seen Yun Yang sitting comfortably in his courtyard, drinking by himself and enjoying himself. Tell me what's the matter. Since you've come to me so soon, you won't be speaking without thinking. Sai, listen to what you're saying. The first batch of people who need special training has arrived. There are 3 of them in this batch. Yun Yang smiled and said, Chief Instructor, you have nothing better to do. Do you want to try it out first? Take a look at the training targets I've picked for you. Dong Qitian rolled his eyes and said, the first batch of people who need special training has arrived? It doesn't matter. As long as they can withstand the training, I don't mind. Does this first training include you, child? Yun Yang nodded and admitted readily, it'll be 4 people including me. The number of people doesn't matter. What are the requirements for the special training? What kind of goal do you want to achieve? Ability comes first. The rest regardless? Yes, that's right. Great, that's great. When Yun Yang said these words, what he was thinking was that the residence of 9 Supremes' overall ability would definitely grow considerably in a short period of time under the supervision of such an expert. At the very least, they would not go down the wrong path. However, Yun Yang really did not know Dong Qitian. He did not know what kind of person the latter was at all. What was more, he did not feel the true meaning of Dong Qitian's words in the conversation just now. As a result, he had sent himself, Shi Wuchen, and the others into the hellish mode in just a few sentences. Today's first night. Chapter 961. Dong Qitian glanced at Yun Yang, then at Shi Wuchen, Shi Bujia, and Kong Luoyue, especially at the trio's undisguised ferocity. He smacked his lips and grinned. Not bad. You kids have a good foundation. Although Young Yun's is the best, the 3 of you aren't bad either. You're all top-notch materials. It's worth my effort to be the chief instructor this time. Shi Wuchen and the other 2 wore a fake smile on their faces. When they heard that, they hugged their chests and scoffed coldly. If you want to be our chief instructor, you can't just rely on your glib tongue. If you want to manipulate us, you'll have to have some real ability. What's the point of boasting and bragging? That's something only any Tom, Dick, and Harry can do. Dong Qitian was taken aback. He smiled meaningfully and said with interest, looks like I'll have to convince all of you before I officially train you. Come at me, all 4 of you. I'll let you witness the chief instructor's level and let you know how high the sky is and how high I am. Yun Yang shook his head like a rattle drum. No, no, no. I don't need to witness it. I've long been convinced by the chief instructor. Yun Yang was not a fool. Why would he jump into such an obvious trap? Everything else aside, Dong Qitian's current performance was at least at the level of a supreme saint. What was Yun Yang? A newly ascended saint? The difference between the 2 was already like the difference of 108,000 miles. Still, Dong Qitian could probably blow him away with just a puff of air. Go and look for trouble? That would be looking for trouble, discomfort, and psychological trauma. Was that what a wise man should do? Shi Wuchen looked at Yun Yang suspiciously. Based on his understanding of Yun Yang, he instinctively felt that something was wrong. Yun Yang said with a straight face, Senior Dong, these 3 are the founders of the residence of 9 Supremes. Their cultivation base is by no means mediocre. Senior Dong, although you're a senior expert, I advise you to take it easy. Dong Qitian nodded. I understand. It's been a long time since I've met an expert. I'll treat this seriously this time, very seriously. Shi Wuchen and the other 2 burst out in laughter. One was guffawing, one was howling, and the last one was sneering. He asked in a reserved manner, Are you sure you want to fight 1 against 3? Dong Qitian blinked. The chief instructor has to look like a chief instructor. Go? Shi Wuchen unsheathed his sword and narrowed his eyes. Excuse me, Chief Instructor. His figure was tall and straight, and his gaze was as sharp as a sword. Shi Wuxia held a long whip in his hand that shone with a golden light. He took a few steps back and smiled with his hands behind his back. Be careful, Chief Instructor. Kong Luiwei held an oddly shaped weapon in each of his hands that gleamed coldly like a sharp awl. He smiled and said, Chief Instructor, these weapons of mine belong to the occult sect. Please be more careful. Dong Qitian nodded slowly. Sure. With a whistle, the three of them simultaneously launched an attack from three different directions. Dong Qitian's expression was calm as usual. He did not dodge or evade, quietly waiting for the trio's attack to reach him. Then with a boom he fiercely attacked. Clang. Shi Wuchen felt an immense force hit his sword. He could no longer hold it and the sword slipped out of his hand. The pretentious expression on his face was still there, but his body had already soared into the air. The moment he flew, he coincidentally saw a whip in Dong Qitian's hand. It was Shi Wuxia's. Shi Wuxia, on the other hand, seemed to be flying right behind him, only a hair's breadth away. Shi Wuchen looked over in disbelief, only to see Dong Qitian casually tossing the whip on the ground like a dead snake. His hand was not empty, his eyes gleaming coldly. It was the occult sect weapon that Kong Luiwei had introduced earlier. Kong Luiwei followed in Shi Wuchen's and Shi Wuxia's footsteps, flying out from behind Dong Qitian. The three of them in the air did not slow down, and they still had the time to look at each other, dumbfounded and disbelief written all over their faces. There was also disbelief. Yes, besides dumbfounded and disbelief there was also disbelief. This seemed like, what was going on? Why did it suddenly, how could such a thing happen? It was happening in real life. It was simply too absurd, too preposterous, wasn't it? In the next moment, Dong Qitian turned into an evil ghost with 1,000 limbs and feet, following closely behind them and unleashing a series of powerful blows that rained down on the trio like a thunderstorm. Do you yield? 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 Duong 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 duong. The sound of fists hitting flesh continuously rang out incessantly and incessantly. The three of them had been flying in the air for more than an hour without falling. Dong Qitian had been beating them up like sandbags for an hour. The three of them did not even have the time to fall to the ground, let alone counterattack or dodge the attacks. They could only be beaten up by Dong Qitian. Time was up. Dong Qitian moved like a phantom and landed quietly on the ground. He stood proudly with his arms behind his back and said coldly, From tonight onward, whoever dares to slack off will be punished 10-fold or 100-fold according to today's punishment. You're welcome to offend them. Before his words echoed in the air, he had already vanished without a trace. A moment later, the three of them fell to the ground with 3 loud thuds, unable to get up for a long time. Yun Yang stared at them suspiciously, almost bursting into laughter upon closer inspection. The three of them looked more than twice their original size from head to toe. The three of them, who had been thin and elegant, had lost all their poise and mannerisms. Yun Yang felt like he was looking at Chen Duoduo's 3 brothers. Simply describing the trio's condition as bruised and swollen could no longer describe their condition. Every part of their bodies was swollen from head to toe. Yet, the swelling was subtle and strangely symmetrical, not at all an eyesore. It was like a fermenting steamed bun that was slowly expanding outwards. The three of them, who seemed to have been completely beaten up, wanted to cry but had no tears. They lay sprawled on the ground, looking at Yun Yang as if they had nothing left to live for. Boss, you're too much. The chief instructor is so sharp. You could have told us earlier. You should have told us earlier. Shi Wuchen's expression was full of resentment, but Yun Yang ignored it. After all, a certain someone's face was different from usual. It would be strange if Yun Yang could tell. At this point, the three of them knew that this was all part of Yun Yang's plan, a huge trap. He clearly knew the extent of this chief instructor's ability, but not only did he reveal it, he had even lured the three of them to challenge him, looking at their muscles that were so swollen that they were almost transparent. Even their scalps were swollen. The three of them wanted to cry but had no tears. How could there be such a con man in this world? Where was the so-called true love in this world? Chapter 962. Early in the morning. The sky was still dark. The four of them were pulled up and each of them had a pill shoved into their mouths. Under Dong Qitian's orders, they sealed their spiritual consciousness, dantian, and 6 senses. Then they were ordered to run in circles while carrying 300 caddies of weight. It was the first time Yun Yang had experienced such a feeling. 6 senses, deific consciousness and dantian were sealed. They could not see, smell or hear anything. All their senses were lost. It was a strange experience. The four of them ran until they were almost out of breath before Dong Qitian paused his morning exercise. Yes, it was only a pause because he had strapped several hundred caddies of protective gear on their arms and calves. Then they began practicing their fist skills, sword skills, saber skills, and footwork. Every punch and kick had to be executed with all the strength in their body to ensure accuracy and completeness. As for the rest time, it was even simpler and more brutal. They could rest temporarily after they passed out from the training. Yes, it was still temporary. Dong Qitian would be responsible to wake whoever passed out and give them a rest time of no less than a quarter of an hour. Then, they would continue. Yunyang could no longer care about how many times the others had knocked him out. He only knew that he had been training. He seemed to have fainted 7 to 8 times until now. After another 2 times, suddenly his dantian moved. Dong Qitian had released the seal on his dantian, but his 6 senses were still sealed. Start cultivating your body now. Focus on cultivating your mystical qi cultivation method. Circulate your mystical qi as fast as you can. Use the fastest speed to make your dantian swell. Then, attack with all your might in front of you. Release all your mystical qi in one go. Make sure your mystical qi dantian is as empty as a string after the attack. Dong Qitian himself was standing in front of the 4 of them. All 4 of their attacks were aimed at him. Dong Qitian blocked each of them effortlessly and commented on their abilities in his mind. There were compliments and criticisms, but he hit the nail on the head. However, the results still surprised him. With Dong Qitian's cultivation base, he could see the level of Yunyang and the other 3 clearly. Yunyang and the other 3's performance was more or less the same as Dong Qitian's initial assessment. Among the 4 of them, Yunyang's mystical qi cultivation base was the weakest even though he had reached the saint level. There was no doubt about it. In spite of this, Yunyang had only fainted 3 times when the other 3 had fainted 10 times and started the process of recovering their mystical qi. When the mystical qi was pushed to the limit, the mystical qi in Yunyang's dantian was the least depleted among the 4 of them. At the very least, in terms of cultivation intensity and results, Yunyang was undoubtedly the most successful, far surpassing his peers. As expected of the empty and spiritual body that has never been seen before in the legends. It really is unique and extraordinary. Dong Qitian praised silently in his heart. Sure, Wuchen and the other 2 aren't just average, they can already be considered as gifted. Yunyang's gift, on the other hand, is at least 3 times more resilient than theirs, and it's only in terms of physical strength. Even with the comprehensive assessment of his deific consciousness and mystical qi, the result will be even more shocking and impressive. Speaking of which, the Demiurge Flawed 10 are interesting. The Demiurge Flawed and Earth Flawed power that flows in their bodies probably has its secrets, but such power is too brutal and extreme. Theoretically, the level of power output is close to the standard pinnacle standard in every realm. No wonder the other sects treat them as whetstones. The level of their power can indeed fulfill the role of whetstone well. However, I can be certain of this because my cultivation base is far above theirs. I've seen through the core level of their cultivation method. It's difficult to discern such things unless it's an experienced pinnacle expert, especially a low-level sect. It's impossible for them to come into contact with such a level. Then, how did they determine these 10 whetstones back then? There must be something I don't know about. It's quite interesting. Perhaps there were some changes that I didn't know about during the thousands of years I was imprisoned, but these 4 people are truly unrefined gold and unpolished jade that's worth carving. Dong Qitian's initial disdain toward his position as the chief instructor had grown to become more and more interested. He was even a little impatient to see what heights these people would reach after he trained them with his cruel method. Dong Qitian was very curious about this. At the same time, he was also curious about how long these people could endure such a cruel training method. This was because there was no comparison at the moment. None of them knew who was beside them, nor did they know if they could continue to endure. Their 6 senses were completely sealed, and they were just a walking corpse that could move. Back then, when my master used this method to test and train me, I only managed to endure for 3 days the first time. I'll need to recover for a period of time before continuing. After roaming the martial world for so many years, the thing I regret the most is that the time I endured was too short back then. That's why I couldn't achieve the earth-shattering achievement like my master. I wonder how long these little fellows can endure. If they can endure for more than 3 days, their future achievements can at least be on par with mine. Under Dong Qitian's interested and expectant gaze, the first day passed in this never-ending special training. At dawn on the second day, the training continued. There was no rest or sleep throughout the entire process. The cycle repeated itself. He trained until his stamina was depleted and he fainted again. He fainted again until the 10th time. He recovered his mystical chi and replenished it as quickly as he could. Then he pushed his body to its limit, attacked with all his might and emptied his mind. He sealed his dantian again. The cycle repeated itself. 3 days passed. At least in Dong Qitian's eyes, the 4 of them who had gone through 3 days of hellish training were almost unrecognizable. However, none of them gave up. The 4 of them continued the cycle. On the 4th day, on the 5th day. Dong Qitian's expression grew more and more shocked. There seemed to be a kind of ruthlessness and tenacity flowing within these 4 young men, a ruthlessness that could train oneself to death for the sake of strength, and a tenacity that persisted relentlessly in their hard work. Not long after the 6th day had begun, Kong Luiyue was the first to give in after about 2 hours. He began to spew blood all over his body and collapsed to the ground. Even his convulsions were weak and he looked like he was on the verge of death. Dong Qitian was long prepared. He flew out immediately to restore Kong Luiyue's 6 senses before proceeding to heal him. His face was calm but his heart was filled with shock. This is only the weakest among the 4 of us, but he's already lasted twice as long as I did back then. Chapter 963. Dong Qitian was extremely puzzled. These fellows were such geniuses. In that case, how blind were these so-called sects with celestial luck banners to treat such a peerless expert seedling as a whetstone? Were they forced to the opposite side? There must be a reason behind this. Naturally, Dong Qitian's suspicion was not without reason. Even if 1 or 2 sects higher-ups were blind, it was impossible for all the higher-ups of the celestial luck banner sects to be as blind as a bat and fail to recognize a gem, right? Moreover, the Demiurge Flawed 10 had experienced the same thing. There must be something else going on. By noon, Shi Wuchen had gloriously become the 2nd person to quit without any consciousness. Dong Qitian waited until the sky turned dark before Shi Wuchen fell to the ground silently. He had lasted the longest among Shi Wuchen and the other 2, and his injuries were the heaviest as well. Even his scalp was starting to spray blood. If it were not for Dong Qitian's timely rescue, his life would have been in danger if there had been a slight delay. This fellow is really ruthless to himself, Dong Qitian murmured. Only those who are ruthless to themselves can be even more ruthless to their enemies. These 3 fellows are really ruthless. Dong Qitian carefully treated the trio's injuries and restored their 6 senses, but he still sealed off the mystical qi in their dantian, not giving them the chance to circulate their mystical qi to heal themselves. He placed them aside and let them sleep soundly, relying on their body's most primitive recovery instinct to heal themselves. When the trio had regained consciousness, he ordered them to eat something and sit quietly at the side. They were not allowed to make a sound, move, or cultivate. Then Dong Qitian focused all his attention on Yun Yang. He remembered that his master had said that he had lasted 7 days in this stage back then. This stage did not seem difficult, but when it came down to it, especially when one was in the position of the person in question, 3 days was equivalent to 100 years of training in hell. According to Dong Qitian's knowledge, his master was the one who had lasted the longest in the history of the sect. His master's achievement was also the highest in the history of the sect. Yun Yang, on the other hand, had persisted in this training for almost 7 days now. Not long after, Shi Wuchen and the others gradually recovered. After familiarizing themselves with their condition, they looked at Yun Yang, who was still persevering in silence, their hearts filled with awe. It was precisely because they had just experienced the same thing that they knew how terrifying this situation was. How cruel. Every moment, every minute, and every second was the most unbearable torture. It was so painful that he wished he were dead. Yun Yang, on the other hand, had started at the same time, but he was still holding on until now. He could still hold on. The 3 of them could not help but admire Yun Yang even more now, especially Shi Wuchen and Kong Luiyue, who were utterly convinced. Not to mention anything else, just this alone was enough for him to wholeheartedly call him boss. Just like that, a full 7 days had passed. Dong Qitian's eyes were shining as he looked at Yun Yang, who was still persevering, but he dared not slack off. This was because during such a training process, the one who was enduring it would not have the support of mystical qi or deific consciousness. It was all borne by the physical body, which would inevitably cause horrifying damage. In the past, holding on for 7 days was the maximum limit of this method. Now that Yun Yang had reached the maximum limit, Dong Qitian was extremely certain of Yun Yang's ability, but he was afraid that Yun Yang would suddenly die the moment he could no longer hold on. That would be unjust. On the 8th day, Ren Qingquang and Lan Ruojuan brought their men back one after another. Lan Ruojuan brought 2 men while Ren Qingquang brought 1. Including Shi Wuchen and the other two, a total of 8 people gathered in the small yard on Yun Yang's mountain peak, observing the situation in silence. As they watched, their gazes were filled with amazement. A journey to hell. Lan Ruojuan and the others watched Yun Yang, who was still going through the process, and Shi Wuchen and the other two who had already ended. Their hearts were in turmoil. Since you've seen it, let's join in. Dong Qitian was not in the mood to talk nonsense now. He cleaned up the 5 of them and began the process right away, together with Yun Yang. When Lan Ruojuan and the others joined in, Dong Qitian released all the restraints on Shi Wuchen and the other two, allowing them to focus on cultivating and elevating their cultivation base. On the afternoon of the 9th day, Shi Wuchen and the other two woke up from their diligent state, each of them filled with shock. Because this time's cultivation had allowed their Xian Qi cultivation to take a qualitative leap. This time his cultivation had increased by almost half a grade. This was half a grade of saint-level cultivation base. In fact, the improvement in their cultivation base was secondary. What they really cared about was the realization that they gained after this cultivation. It was unprecedentedly profound. The endurance of their meridians and the range of their deific consciousness had also experienced an astonishing improvement that was akin to a complete transformation. This is another form of rebirth, Dong Qitian explained indifferently as he looked at the 6 people who were still in the purgatory. The 3 of them knew that this was not the time to understand this, so they focused their attention on Yun Yang. The same thought came to their minds at the same time: how many more days could Yun Yang, who was still holding on now, last? In fact, this was a question that everyone was curious about. Lan Ruojuan and the other 4 had each held on for more than 6 days. Before 7 days they succumbed one after another and were reduced to spectators after recovering. However, it was precisely because of this that the 8 brothers were even more shocked and impressed by Yun Yang, who was still holding on. Including these days, Yun Yang had held on for half a month. Shi Wuchen and the other 7 instinctively had a feeling in their hearts: why is he the boss? This is the qualification. If you're not convinced, go ahead. The few newcomers who were initially unconvinced were now completely convinced, no longer having second thoughts. This was strength as well. This was real strength. No one could doubt it. This perseverance lasted until the 18th day. Without warning, Yun Yang fell head first to the ground. Dong Qitian dashed forward like a bolt of lightning, his body trembling and his eyes bloodshot. He shoved a medicinal pill into Yun Yang's mouth at once and activated the seal on his 6 senses, ensuring that Yun Yang was still breathing and that his life was safe. Looking at Yun Yang sinking into a deep coma, Dong Qitian's gaze was as if he had found a peerless treasure. This boss of yours I can predict. Dong Qitian's voice was trembling as he said word by word. He will definitely create a new history in the bound of universe. Dong Qitian's voice was filled with certainty. He should not have been so highly complimentary. He should have even played it down to prevent Yun Yang and the others from becoming arrogant. Chapter 964. Yun Yang had returned to the world of light from the extreme darkness. It was like the light of dawn, like the return of hope. What was left of his rationality recovered swiftly. As his thoughts cleared up, he felt pain all over his body as if he was being torn into thousands of pieces. Furthermore, why was he exceptionally aware of every pain in every part of his body? Yun Yang could not help but moan in agony at the realization. Why did his sense of pain seem to have gotten stronger? Then he quickly realized that it was not only his sense of pain that had gotten stronger, but all of his senses had become stronger as well. At this moment he closed his eyes and didn't use his divine sense, but he could still clearly sense the people around him, how many people there were, whether they were men or women, and even their body odors, postures, expressions, and strength levels. Everything that he sensed now was even clearer than when he had his eyes open. Activating his deific consciousness to confirm his senses, Yun Yang was pleasantly surprised to find that the power of his deific consciousness seemed to have been reborn. It was as if it had a life of its own and could stretch freely within a certain distance. His deific consciousness space seemed to have at least doubled in size as well. His hearing had gotten stronger as well, and his sense of smell. Thinking of this, Yun Yang smelled a pungent stench that was enough to make him wish he was dead. The stench was laced with sourness, bitterness, and f***. Was this not the smell of his own body? He had only opened his eyes for a moment. How could he not know that his vision had gotten stronger? With that in mind, Yun Yang attempted to circulate the mystical qi in his dantian. It was only a mere thought, a slight movement at most, but he could already feel the mystical qi around him surging like a tsunami, swiftly reaching every part of his body. He was ready for anything. Be it offense, defense, healing, recovery, or output, everything went according to his wishes. It was as easy as a thought, with no buffer at all. Even his physical reflexes were much stronger than before. Did it double or even more? Then Yunyang was surprised to find that his body seemed to have awakened 2 more chakras. He had already awakened all his chakras, so how could there be 2 more? Yunyang sensed carefully and realized that it was not chakras, but 2 more whirlpools of air had appeared around his dantian. Does that mean I have 2 more dantians? What was going on? Now the sky opening 3 dantians? Yunyang thought to himself. Previously, 9 innately awakened chakras was already considered an unparalleled genius. Now there are actually more awakened dantians. I wonder how to judge. After a moment of observation and judgment, Yunyang realized that his mystical chi cultivation base had improved by leaps and bounds after being honed by this training. He had clearly just broken through to the first rank of the Saint Realm not too long ago, yet he was actually on the verge of reaching the pinnacle. How many days had it been? Yes, how long has it been since the beginning of the training? Yunyang had no sense of the current time, not even a blur. After all, his 6 senses and deific consciousness had been sealed during the previous training. None of his senses were present. In the end, Yunyang was only holding on to a single thought that he did not want to give up. Everything else had been neglected. Yunyang was shocked by the changes in his body. His cultivation base had improved by leaps and bounds, and he was immensely shocked. However, he also felt many gazes focused on him. They were from Shi Wuchen and the other 7. Their gazes were all focused on him, and it was as if they were looking at a deity, full of respect and admiration. Also, there were 3 strangers among them. 3 of them had never seen him before. Where did admiration come from? Respect was even more inexplicable. However, Yunyang could see that these 3 people, no, all 8 of them present, were filled with respect and admiration that came from the bottom of their hearts. There was nothing fake about it. But this made him even more confused. Seeing that he had finally woken up from the hellish training and the subsequent recuperation, the 8 of them spoke in unison, "Boss." Yunyang scratched his head, still dumbfounded. "We've only trained together once. Why are they so willing to acknowledge me as their boss? Isn't this a little too much of a joke?" The Demiurge Flawed 10 were by no means mediocre. To be able to attain the fame they had today and to be subjected to so much unfair treatment, they must all be unyielding and stubborn fellows. It was like a joke that they had been subdued so easily. Yunyang had even set up countless ways to establish his dominance over the Demiurge Flawed 10, including how he should deal with them if they were to ostracize him and make him a mere figurehead. He had even come up with an extreme strategy. However, it seemed like he did not need to use any of them now. Not only was there no need to be extreme, he did not even need to use the most basic of appeasement to win their hearts. Although Yunyang had always thought highly of himself and belittled himself, he was not confident that he would be worshipped and worshipped the moment he met them. This was especially the case when the arrogant and unruly expressions on their faces were clearly still there. However, when they faced him, they were filled with respect and admiration that came from the bottom of their hearts. Yes, especially admiration. That kind of inferiority was especially obvious. What made Yunyang feel that something was amiss and illogical was that these 8 fellows seemed to be stronger than him in terms of mystical chi. He had improved tremendously after this hellish training, but these fellows before him seemed to have improved as well. Why were they looking up to him like this? Although the feeling of being looked up to by others was really good, it felt really good. "You've all performed well?" Dong Qitian praised them faintly. He had already worked very hard to suppress his emotions and calm down his excited mood. Only then did he control the speed of his speech as much as possible. When he said these words, he tried his best to express his indifference and disdain. However, he could not help but blurt out the words, "You've all performed well," which revealed his true feelings. Dong Qitian had wanted to say that their performances were only average, but he felt that he could not bring himself to say such an evaluation. He was, after all, a man of great status. He did not want to erase his conscience and make irresponsible remarks. The 9 of them looked up at Dong Qitian in unison, waiting for him to explain. The 9 of them were not stupid. Dong Qitian must have his reasons for using such a method, and they had clearly benefited greatly from the cruelty. Guanuanyang, who had the highest cultivation base among them, had broken through his cultivation base that had been stuck at the pinnacle of first-level saint for 2 years and officially stepped into second-level saint through this brutal training. They would never believe that Dong Qitian had no ulterior motives for his actions. The method I've applied to all of you is called the Art of Ultimate Heaven. It's a secret of my sect, and it's only used when the sect selects its inner disciples. The disciples who use this method, be it in terms of aptitude, tenacity, endurance, or potential, will all be displayed in the most direct and vivid manner during this training. After all the senses are shut off, what's left to persevere is only one's natural instincts. I received a lot of birthday presents yesterday, I'm very happy. But, there's a bottle of medicine sent by someone without an address, name, or phone number. It's a brain potion. What the F***ck is this? It's the first time I've heard of such a medicine. The description on it was clearly printed. Exclusively used by Feng Ling Tian. Chapter 965. Dong Qitian said solemnly, there's always the most subtle weakness, cowardice, and even compromise in human nature. Such a flaw in human nature will definitely appear when one is caught in such an ultimate technique, and it will appear in the most extreme way. It's precisely because of this that my sect has always used this method to test the inner sect disciples. There's never been any deviation. For hundreds and thousands of years, the core strength of the sect has to be the most outstanding among those of the same cultivation base in the entire bound of universe. If it wasn't for a natural disaster that destroyed the sect's foundation and the sects of the entire bound of universe taking advantage of the situation to attack us, our sect would have been. Dong Qitian looked into the distance and said quietly, I was born late, so I didn't encounter that catastrophe. It's a blessing for me, but it's also a pity. From then on, our sect's disciples scattered like the stars in the clouds, never to return to the glory of the past. However, the surviving disciples of our sect, each and every one of us, will take the glory of being a disciple of our sect and swear to never change. Lan Ruojuan mused and said respectfully, is the sect that Senior is talking about the ultimate heaven sect that shook the entire bound of universe 30,000 years ago and almost replaced the East Celestial Palace? Yes, Dong Qitian answered faintly. Upon hearing that, all 8 of them paled. Although they had already guessed it before receiving the answer, they were still shocked to hear it with their own eyes. Yun Yang was the only one who did not know the history of the ultimate heaven sect, so he did not have any other reaction. There was only a wave of shock. A sect had almost replaced the East Celestial Palace? Just how powerful was this sect? The talents of the few of you are quite good. If you had joined the ultimate heaven sect back then, you would have been able to rank among the top 10 disciples of the youngest generation of the ultimate heaven sect with just this test of the ultimate heaven method. Dong Qitian said softly, you have a bright future ahead of you. Never underestimate yourself. Lan Ruojuan frowned and said, Senior, do you mean that we, the Demiurge Flawed 10, can ascend to the peak as well? We can also become figures like the Supreme Lord? Dong Qitian narrowed his eyes and said faintly, any cultivator who's qualified to become one of the ultimate heaven sect's top 10 inner sect disciples, as long as they don't die prematurely in the future, all of them will be existences worthy of respect. Lan Ruojuan asked, even if the shackles in our bodies still exist? Dong Qitian replied, shackles? Are you referring to the heaven incomplete and earth incomplete inheritance that you obtained? The 8 of them were stunned for a moment before they nodded in surprise. Yes. Up until now, Dong Qitian was the first person to notice the peculiarity in the Demiurge Flawed 10's cultivation method and expose it. Naturally, Shi Wuchen and the others wanted to know the truth. My knowledge on this is limited as well, and there are still many things I don't understand, Dong Qitian said. However, our sect's ultimate heaven technique points directly to one's true self. There's no mistaking it. Perhaps, when your cultivation reaches a certain level, you'll have an epiphany. The only advice I can give you now is to let nature take its course and work hard. Lan Ruojuan and the others perked up and asked even more respectfully, may I know your name, Senior? This is the chief instructor of the residence of 9 Supremes, Yun Yang said, Dong Qitian. Heaven equaling Supreme Saint. Lan Ruojuan and the others exclaimed. Yun Yang rubbed his nose. Heaven equaling Supreme Saint is such a resounding name. Little Fatty was shocked once and these fellows were shocked again. When I heard it, I was almost shocked as well. Compared to Yun Yang's insolence, Lan Ruojuan and the others were much more shocked. Dong Qitian, an unparalleled character who had disappeared for thousands of years, had suddenly reappeared and unexpectedly became the chief instructor of the residence of 9 Supremes, a newly founded sect that was like a shrimp. To the Demiurge Flawed 10 it was like a dream. Yes, no matter how deep the residence of 9 Supremes' foundation was and how promising its future was, it could not change the fact that it was a newly founded sect without a celestial luck banner. If there was a second choice, basically no cultivator above saint level would choose to stay in such a sect. It was true that the ethereal amethyst could improve a cultivator's lack of spiritual chi to a certain extent, but it was not a long-term solution. Moreover, it was only a matter of time before someone coveted the spiritual material of this grade in the sect. The fact that 8 of the Demiurge Flawed 10 had joined the residence of 9 Supremes at the same time could be said to have solved the shortcoming of insufficient overall strength, but the sect still lacked the most fundamental combat power. Take Kangwu Union for example. Other than their leader who was already at the pinnacle of 4th level saint level, they still had a Grand Supreme Elder whose cultivation base was even higher. Now, however, it was suddenly revealed that Dong Qitian was the chief instructor of the residence of 9 Supremes. The surprise was simply overwhelming. They were overjoyed, unable to contain their joy. Among them, Shi Wuchen was even more pleased, secretly praising himself for having a good eye. Boss Yun Yang's innate talent and temperament were not just a few levels higher than others, but the great deeds he had displayed time and time again were shocking enough. From giving him the ethereal amethyst when they first met, then transforming into the raiders of all but heaven and going on a killing spree with the black and white ruthless duo, then connecting with the General Commerce League to dispose of stolen goods, then the Spirit's Grave and now the legendary peerless Dong Qitian as the chief instructor, every single one of them was shocking and heart-stirring. Yet, such a choice was made by their boss, the residence of 9 Supremes lead Supreme. As the second Supreme, how could they not be proud and high-spirited? Lan Ruojuan and Ren Xingquang shared the same sentiment. They understood the residence of 9 Supremes' current structure better than the other Demiurge Flawed 10. While they were sincerely convinced by Yin Yang, they did not acknowledge Shi Wuchen's position as the second Supreme. All they wanted was to defeat Shi Wuchen in the upcoming sect competition and occupy the position as the second Supreme for a long time. The position of supremacy should be occupied by those who were capable. Those who were not capable should give it up immediately. There were also a few other Demiurge Flawed 10. Although they had just arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes and had not even officially entered the school, they already felt a strong sense of belonging and were no longer hesitant. Dong Qitian's sharp gaze swept across the 9 people in front of him, a strange feeling suddenly growing within him. It seems like being the chief instructor for these 9 people is not unacceptable. He was now very much looking forward to what kind of brilliance these 9 prodigies would shine in the future. Would they shine upon the bound of universe and bring color to the world? Alright, let's not talk about anything else. I'll give all of you a night's rest. Dong Qitian turned and left. The cultivation will officially begin tomorrow. Don't think that the official training will be as easy as before. Before his words echoed in the air, he was already gone. Yun Yang and the others were not having an easy time during this half a month, but Dong Qitian was also very tired, very tired. On a mental level, however, it was even more tiring. This was because he had to watch over everyone alone, and he had to be aware of what was going on at all times. The art of ultimate heaven might seem simple, but it was actually extremely subtle. If the person in charge of casting the art was slightly careless and could not save the overburdened trainees in time, they would easily die. It was not a joke. Chapter 966. When the Ultimate Heaven sect's first ancestor reflected on the matter afterward and sighed at the unpredictability of the world, he engraved this unique experience into his mind. When he took in his successor disciples, he purposely put them in a similar predicament to test the disciples' temperament. However, this method was extremely dangerous. It was difficult to handle unless one was extremely talented and had an exceptional temperament, especially those with extraordinary perseverance. One's state of mind could easily collapse, go crazy, or become demented. The Ultimate Heaven sect's legacy had been passed down for generations. Many talented disciples who had high hopes from their masters had all failed at this stage and died prematurely in their cultivation journey. The Ultimate Heaven sect's seniors had finally perfected this training method after generations of accumulated experience. The Ultimate Heaven's will was actually more of a warning that even heaven had its limits, let alone man. As the host, Dong Qitian had to urge and supervise to eliminate external interference. On the other hand, he had to constantly pay attention to not overexerting himself or cripple his meridians. He had to aim for the last moment when the trainee had reached his limit and intervene to save him. This was not only a physical task but also a test of one's experience and judgment. If the timing was a little too fast and the trainee had not reached his limit, the cultivation would be flawed. If the timing was a little too slow, the trainee would have exceeded his limit. His meridians would be severely damaged if he was lucky, and he would die if he was unlucky. Only when the timing was perfect could the effect be maximized. How could it be easy? Although everyone who participated in the training was extremely exhausted during this period of time, they could at least rest for a while when they passed out from training. Dong Qitian, however, dared not even blink. He was the most exhausted. In the past, when the ultimate heaven method was perfected, the most a master could do was watch over 2 or 3 disciples at the same time. Now he had to watch over 9. Dong Qitian felt like he had really gone mad. Even though he knew that the few of them had a lot to talk about, Dong Qitian felt that he might really die if he did not sleep soon. Of course, he was more mentally exhausted. He had been extremely nervous before this, especially when it came to Yun Yang. He had been paying attention to him to the extreme, not daring to slack off. Now that the matter had come to an end, apart from being overjoyed, the exhaustion washed over him like a tidal wave. It officially starts tomorrow? The 9 of them looked at each other when they heard this. It had not even started after training someone to this extent? He had already lost half of his life, okay? If this could be described as easy, how could it be described as difficult? Could they have been given away when they exchanged for low-level spiritual stones? Say, where did your nicknames come from? Yin Yang asked curiously. I wouldn't dare to say that it's a title. Those titles are just titles that the few of us discussed and made for ourselves when we were roaming the Jianghu. They're all made up by ourselves and not just for fame. Ren Qingquang was even more direct as he said, you only need to hire a few people to brag about your real name in the martial world, and you'll probably be able to find it. At most, when we roam the martial world, we'll add another sentence. I'm the 3 autumn swordsman Shi Wuchen. After a few times of shameless promotion, it would naturally spread out. Why don't you use your own name as an example? Shi Wuchen said angrily. Ren Qingquang rolled his eyes and said, how can I use my own name as an example for such a disgraceful thing? Of course, I have to use the most undeserving person as an example. The group burst into laughter. Yun Yang said faintly, what an eye-opener, what an eye-opener. This was the truth. Yun Yang had always thought that only the nicknames given by the martial world could be called nicknames. Who would have thought that these fellows' nicknames were actually made up by themselves? It could not be considered as a name but a name given by someone else. Boss, you've just ascended to the bound of universe and you're an incredible cultivator in your original realm. How would you know that you don't have any background, and you're not from some celestial luck banner school? It's such a difficult thing to make a name for yourself, Ren Qingquang sighed. It's really difficult to make a name for yourself in the martial world if you don't think of a way. If you don't come up with a nickname that you like and let it develop, you'll probably be shamed for life if some sect disciple with ulterior motives gives you a nickname. There's such a thing? Yin Yang was shocked. Chapter 967. Ren Qingquang's words aren't baseless. Ping Xiaoyi sighed and chimed in with deep emotion. For example, there was a rogue cultivator called Han Yun Kong. This person was brought up in public by his enemies. Whenever someone mentioned Han Yun Kong, they would say, intentionally or unintentionally, Han Yun Kong. Is that Han Yun Kong who's known as the 3 piles of dog shit? Who would have thought that he'd become a joke after that? The name 3 piles of dog shit, Han Yun Kong, has always been mocked and mocked. He couldn't wash it away even after he died. He carried this infamy his entire life, wanting to wash it away his entire life, but he never succeeded. Until his death, he was still cursing at the heavens. How could a name mislead a man? And the thing that led to the tragedy of his life was this malicious prank. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, I can't believe there's such a thing. There are too many ways to kill in the martial world. It's not common for a name to force someone to their death, but it's not that rare either. Ping Xiaoyi sighed softly. Once someone maliciously makes a name out of it, such as the sex fiend of the generation or cruel and unscrupulous or other derogatory names that everyone knows, and then a bunch of people add fuel to the fire and spread it everywhere as a joke, as time passes, it will become deeply rooted. A name has always been a martial artist's second life. That's why it's better to take one and boast about it than to have someone make one for you maliciously. Guanyuanyang was touched as well. That's right. My name of Everlasting Assassin back then was given to me by someone else. My ambition was never to be an assassin, but to live up to this name I turned myself into one. Although I'm very suitable in the end, it's still a blessing in misfortune. If my talent wasn't suitable to be an assassin, I'd be laughed at for the rest of my life with this name. The crowd was speechless. The group chatted as they cultivated and recuperated. The atmosphere was unusually harmonious. Through this exchange, Yun Yang finally understood the reason why these fellows respected and admired him so much. The longest we've lasted was only 7 days. Shi Wuchen leaned in to send a telepathic message. Boss, you, on the other hand, you've lasted for a whole 18 days. You're truly capable of doing what no one else can. Yun Yang understood immediately. So that was how it was. However, strength was respected in the Jianghu. If he wanted to convince the geniuses, he had to perform better than them. In particular, his degree of monstrousness had obviously exceeded the limits of their imagination. Of course, what he received was recognition and heartfelt admiration. Boss, the 9 of us have a common request. Tai Ching-sang stood up and said respectfully, I hope you'll agree, eldest brother. 9 people? Yun Yang was puzzled. Where did these 9 people come from? Everyone laughed. Wu Minghuan and Luo Dajiang are also on their way and they should be here soon. So, the 9 of us have to join hands to ask for this favor. The number of people isn't right either. Shouldn't it be 10? Yun Yang was confused, probably because he had been tormented too much during this period of time that his brain was lacking. Excluding Shi Wuchen, of course it's 9 people, a few of them said in unison. Shi Wuchen was enraged. I'm warning all of you, don't try anything funny. Otherwise don't blame me for being rude. Not only am I the second supreme, but I'm also supreme sword. The 7 of them were not afraid of a certain someone's blatant threat and responded coldly, what can you do if we try anything funny? What do you dare to do? We've joined hands to ask eldest brother that the title of the residence of 9 supremes will not change except for eldest brother's position as the first supreme, but the titles of the others will not be decided for now. When everyone is here we'll decide the order from 2nd to 9th based on our strength. Yun Yang said, but there are only 9 supremes in the residence of 9 supremes. Of the 10 of you there must be 2 left. What should we say? The 2 people with the lowest results don't even need to talk about titles. They're only fit to be the sex guardians. How can they dream of being supremes when they're not as skilled as others? Yes, that's right. But first we must pull Shi Wuchen down. Together with us. What right does he have to be the second supreme? Just because he's so big? Shi Wuchen almost vomited blood. You, Tai Ching-sang shouted, this brat actually dares to be provocative. Brothers, let's beat this brat into submission first. The 7 of them swarmed forward. Not long after, Shi Wuchen's face was swollen, and he was on the verge of death. Eldest brother, Shi Wuchen has agreed. Ping Xiaoyi screamed. Shi Wuchen opened his mouth to retort, but Ren Qingquang, who was in the crowd, covered his mouth tightly and said loudly, eldest brother, Shi Wuchen has agreed. He should have no objections. The 7 of them cheered together. Shi Wuchen is indeed one of the demiurge flawed 10. He's honest and upright. Shi Wuchen struggled with all his might, his eyes wide with grief and indignation, but he could not utter a word. All right. The 10 supremes are of the same breath and branch, sharing weal and woe. Then this matter is decided. However, there's one thing that I must say first. If Shi Wuchen wins the position of second supreme with his strength, no one is allowed to disrespect him anymore. Yun Yang smirked and said, the residence of 9 supremes is a place with rules. The group was elated. Yes, eldest brother. Shi Wuchen cried out in despair, I don't. His mouth was covered again, and the 7 of them thanked him in unison. Thank you, eldest brother. Shi Wuchen has fainted from joy. Yun Yang rolled his eyes, pretending that he did not see what these fellows were doing. In his mind, however, he was thinking, whom should I help this fellow? Yun Yang understood what Lan Ruojuan, Ren Qingquang and the others were doing. They were all part of the demiurge flawed 10. Although Shi Wuchen had the advantage of being a step earlier, his advantage was not in a proper position. If he were to be placed above everyone else, no one would be happy about it. As time went by, there might even be more problems. If Shi Wuchen could emerge victorious with his strength, the crowd would have nothing to say. That was why he agreed readily. He wasn't just sitting there and watching the show. After the special training, the residence of 9 supremes ranking match will begin immediately. Work hard, everyone. All right. At this moment, little Fatty ran over. Eldest brother, there are 3 people outside the mountain gate who have been waiting for you for 12 days. They're going crazy. Who? They're from the General Commerce League. Little Fatty was a little worried. Are they here to cause trouble? Yun Yang recalled his conversation with Feng Guohai the other day and understood everything at once. He had actually completely forgotten about this matter. It seemed that Feng Guohai and the others were really anxious. Chapter 968. Feng Guohai stared at Yin Yang speechless. We, the General Commerce League, are in the martial world, but our main role is still to do business. Doing business has always been about honesty and harmony brings wealth. No matter how good the trading partner has, it's hard to do business if we don't abide by honesty, Feng Guohai said word by word, staring at Yin Yang. It looked like he was furious. Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao, who were beside Feng Guohai, were speechless as well. The three of them were so frustrated, especially after waiting anxiously during this period of time, that they were on the verge of a mental breakdown. Even with their experience and knowledge, they had never seen such a person. The last time, he had left behind such a solemn statement that there were good items that needed to be prepared beforehand. How could the General Commerce League not know that this entry would very likely bring out the items that they had been longing for? Therefore, it only took a total of 2 days for the General Commerce Alliance to gather, search and excavate at an unprecedented speed, turning a few of the General Commerce Alliance's warehouses upside down. They gathered countless items of great value and had specially assigned experts to escort them over. Naturally, they contacted Yun Yang as soon as they arrived. After all, they had brought a massive amount of good stuff this time, enough to attract the covetous eyes of most forces in this world. Previously, the raiders of all but Heaven's black and white ruthless duo Yengua had made a huge commotion, claiming to have plundered an immeasurable amount of wealth. To a single cultivator, the wealth was impressive, but it was not enough to catch the attention of high-level experts in higher-level sections. They were, at most, slightly tempted. Otherwise, the ones who had targeted Yun Yang and the others would not have only been cultivators below the pinnacle of Saint Realm. In spite of this, the items that the General Commerce League had gathered this time could no longer be evaluated by the ordinary value of this world. The most conservative estimate would be at least 100 times more than what Yin Yang and the others had plundered. Be it the quality or quantity, it was astounding. Although the General Commerce League was a sect that owned a middle-class celestial luck banner, this trip was a secret. Only Feng Guohai, Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao had come along. It was risky and difficult to be safe, especially when it was the delicate juncture of the Celestial Luck Banner contest. If something were to go wrong, the General Commerce League might not be able to recover and suffer a great loss. But who would have thought that at such a critical moment, this fellow would go into seclusion as if nothing had happened? It did not matter if they went into closed-door cultivation because the residents of Nine Supreme's mountain guarding formation had given Feng Guohai and his companions another surprise. Feng Guohai and his companions were knowledgeable people. Based on their estimations, the mountain guarding formation could at least withstand the attack of experts above the level of Royal Saint. It was indeed a great investment. Who would have thought that Yun Yang's closed-door cultivation would last for half a month? This time was a little too long. Because the moment the three of them arrived was coincidentally the first day of this guy's secluded cultivation. Over the past few days of waiting, the three of them had become so anxious that their eyes were about to go blind. The three of them had brought along a large amount of treasures that could shock the entire bound of universe. Staying in the barren mountain day after day was definitely a form of torture. Even with the exceptionally sturdy protection, it was still difficult for them to feel at ease. After all, there were so many precious treasures in his pocket. Staying a moment longer could lead to serious consequences. Putting aside the fact that the bound of universe's martial world was already unusually chaotic during this period of time, there was also the constant urging from the General Commerce League's headquarters. It was so urgent that the three of them had goosebumps on their heads. They could understand the headquarters' anxiety. The matter had to be kept absolutely confidential. Although the three of them were capable experts, their capabilities were not enough compared to the treasures that they had brought with them. Furthermore, since the General Commerce League was known as a league, it meant that it was not a monolithic entity. The initial idea was thoughtful. Feng Guohai and his companions had witnessed Yun Yang's method of activating the spirit's grave. They were aware that the transaction was slightly risky, but the duration of the transaction was extremely short. This alone had reduced the risk significantly. However, the extended duration of the transaction had severely increased the risk of the transaction. This was why Feng Guohai and his companions had been anxious and restless for the past half a month. They were also on tenterhooks. The feeling was indescribable. Now that Yun Yang had finally come out, the three of them could finally relax. However, looking at Yun Yang's smug expression, they already felt that their self-restraint was commendable, far surpassing their own self-assessment, for they did not charge forward and beat the fellow up right away. Yun Yang grinned in agreement and said, "I understand what you mean, Elder Feng. The General Commerce League should of course be honest. Harmony brings wealth. This is the reason why I chose to work with the League back then." Feng Guohai stared at him without blinking as he said, "I didn't mean that. I meant..." He paused and continued, "If it wasn't for this, I would have beaten you up a long time ago." Yun Yang chuckled dryly. Elder Feng is humorous indeed. Humorous indeed. Feng Guohai snorted and said weakly, Supreme Cloud, are you planning to invite us to your mountain gate for a business discussion? Not at all. Come in quickly. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. Yun Yang invited the three of them in with an extremely passionate attitude, as if he was welcoming the god of fortune. In reality, the other party's current identity was that of a god of fortune. He lived up to his name and lived up to his name. Currently, Yun Yang, Emmy, and the entire residence of 9 Supremes would have to rely on these people for a considerable period of time in the future to get the various treasures of heaven and earth that Yun Yang, Emmy, and even the entire residence of 9 Supremes needed. Once Feng Guohai and his companions entered, they were shocked once more. Your residence of 9 Supremes is starting to take shape. Not only is the mountain guarding formation remarkable, but the interior is even more extraordinary. With their keen eyesight, Feng Guohai and his companions could naturally see the unusual atmosphere within the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate. As far as the eye could see, the spiritual qi in the residence of 9 Supremes was profound and the providence was vast. It did not look like a newly established sect at all. At least, it was completely different from the last time they came. It was like they were two different people. Not at all. My sect is just starting to take shape. How can it catch the attention of the capable ones? It's still too early, Yun Yang said disapprovingly, shaking his head. He was speaking the truth from the bottom of his heart. He was not putting on an act. To Yun Yang, the residence of 9 Supremes could only be considered to be displaying its splendor when the 9 Supremes officially returned to their positions. How could this be considered as the residence of 9 Supremes? Excessive modesty is a form of arrogance. Gu Jiuxiao snorted and rolled his eyes. I dare not. I wonder what quality goods the 3 seniors have brought this time? Why don't you let me broaden my horizons first? Yun Yang went straight to the point after a brief exchange of pleasantries. He looked impatient. Humph, Feng Guohai said in a low voice, how much more upper-class spiritual jade do you need the last time, Supreme Cloud? Yun Yang replied, Didn't I make myself clear? The upper-class spiritual jade isn't much. At least it's far above the minimum limit. What you lack is the heaven and earth resources and various rare metals. Could it be that the League has only prepared upper-class spiritual jade this time? Yun Yang's face was filled with worry. Feng Guohai said faintly, Supreme Cloud's previous reminder is still ringing in my ears. This old man is asking for confirmation before the transaction. This time, the League has prepared 3 stocks of heaven and earth resources for you as well as 10 types of rare metals. It's not a lot, but each stock of heaven and earth resource is a rare class in this world. It's not just priceless, but it's also priceless. Each of the rare metals is also good stuff that's passed down in legends. He said softly, Brother Yun, this old man is confirming for the last time. This isn't something to be joked about. If the items you offer to trade can't meet our expectations, you know what I mean. Chapter 969. Yun Yang's expression turned indifferent as he said nonchalantly, I can understand your League's sincerity. Speaking of completing the deal, I can't guarantee it myself. Even if I can, it'll only be empty words. We'll have to wait until we carry our guests into the spirit's grave this time. As for what I can bring out, it's not up to me. I hope Elder Feng can understand, but I believe that the items from the spirit's grave won't disappoint the General Commerce League. That would be best, Feng Guohai said solemnly. He took out a spatial ring and said softly, check it out yourself. The 10 rare metals are fine, but some heaven and earth treasures can't be exposed to the light. I understand, Yun Yang replied. He then accepted the ring. The 3 heaven and earth treasures this time are a 20,000-year-old phantom ginseng, a 17,000-year-old ghost lingji, and a 15,000-year-old amorphous lotus. Any one of them is more than 10 times more valuable than the 10,000-year-old blood ginseng you obtained last time. Yun Yang was overjoyed by Feng Guohai's words. The phantom ginseng and the ghost lingji were known to be extremely rare, but the third item, the amorphous lotus, was even rarer. The amorphous lotus did not have a fixed place to grow. It grew out of thin air and floated in midair, remaining the same from birth until maturity. This was how the amorphous lotus got its name. It was also because of this special characteristic of the indefinite lotus that it was so rare. If it wasn't for the fact that it had the special characteristic of staying in a place for a period of time where spiritual qi was abnormally abundant, no one would know about it and no one would be able to get it. When the amorphous lotus was almost done absorbing the spiritual qi, it would return to hover in the air and continue to drift with the wind, its destination unknown until it found the next place with abundant spiritual chi. When it reached a place with abundant spiritual chi, it would be the only chance to obtain it. Due to this characteristic, the amorphous lotus was rarely more than 1,000 years old. After all, the places with abundant spiritual chi in this world were frequented by high-level cultivators. Usually, 99% of the fated ones would pluck it immediately after discovering it. The possibility of the same cultivator encountering the same stock at different points in his life was zero, so there was no room to give it up temporarily and wait for it to grow older. As a result, this amorphous lotus that was 15,000 years old was simply a legend among legends. It was a top-grade treasure that was difficult to set a price for. Yun Yang looked through the items in the spatial ring and was already beaming with joy. He said cheerfully, "The offering this time will be a success. I'm confident that everyone's hard work will not be in vain." Xiao Yushu reminded him, "Don't be too happy just yet. The number of goods we need to trade here is not small. A fair trade is the only way to get something back." "I won't let you down." Yun Yang laughed. The General Commerce League's offer was generous. Putting aside the 3 stalks of E-grade spiritual herbs, the 10 types of exotic metals alone were enough to make Yun Yang overjoyed. Whether it was the stellar steel or the extraterrestrial meteorite, although they were not considered rare or exotic, they were genuine premium goods with an extraordinary value. What surprised Yun Yang the most were the 2 pieces of unique, dark gold metals that glowed in color. "Is this the heaven mystical gold?" Yun Yang's eyes shone. Emmy, who was in the space, was already raring to go, drooling as it waved its tendrils around anxiously, its sprout hopping to urge it to move. The 3 stalks of spiritual herbs were incomparably attractive to Emmy. It wished it could skip Yun Yang and swallow the 3 spiritual herbs in one go. Emmy had been treated rather well throughout its journey with Yun Yang, but it was still in Tianshan continent after all. The quality of the heaven and earth treasures it had come into contact with was too limited. It was a pity that as an innate divine being, it was actually the first time it had seen such a high-level E-grade spiritual herb. The excitement of having dreamt of the premium item made it dance uncontrollably. The celestial cotton gold that Yun Yang had sent in a few days ago had already made Emmy overjoyed. It had been dissecting it diligently these few days and had finally broken down some of the celestial cotton tree's material, allowing Emmy to cultivate the celestial cotton tree itself. As for the remaining long metal chain, Emmy did not waste it either. It attempted to merge it with the original exotic metals in the space, hoping that it could be refined and transformed into a better and more perfect material. The rare metals that Yun Yang had sent in earlier had been broken down by Emmy, the impurities removed. The pile that was originally like a small hill was now less than half the size of a house, but the quality was at least a few times better than before. Emmy was still grumbling to Yun Yang about how it could not further merge the finished product without high-quality exotic metals. Then, Feng Guohai and the others had sent in various exotic metals. The heaven and earth treasures outside exuded a unique air of vitality that had long excited Emmy, and it could not wait any longer. "Aya," Emmy kept urging Yun Yang to work quickly. "It could not wait any longer. Your league's preparation this time has surprised me. It's even higher than my highest expectations." Yun Yang said in satisfaction, "Compared to before, the things you've prepared this time are much more than what you've prepared." Feng Guohai reminded him cautiously, "Brother Yun, you mustn't be blindly optimistic. You must know that we've paid a hefty price to finance this transaction. We'll see if you can produce something that's worth the trade later. Otherwise, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to repay this debt alone. May I ask, Elder Feng, how much would the items you've prepared be worth if they were converted into upper-class spiritual jade pieces according to the market price?" asked Yun Yang. "At least 400,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces. If they were to be auctioned, it would probably be as high as 1 million. Feng Guohai's expression was somber when he spoke of the figures. "Brother Yun, the items for trade this time have been prepared according to the request you've mentioned last time. We believe that we'll get something special in this trade. That's why we've put in so much effort to come up with these. If we don't get that something special, the higher-ups will be very disappointed. 400,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces is only the market price. The 3 stalks of spiritual herbs alone would be worth more than that if they were auctioned off. Brother Yun, you must understand this." Yun Yang replied, I understand. I understand your sincerity. If I can't reciprocate your sincerity, it'll be my fault. Fairness is the most important thing in a transaction. This applies to the other party and it applies to me as well." Gu Jiuxiao, who had always been cold, stepped forward to remind Yun Yang. Young Yun, of course there's a guarantee of safety when working with the General Commerce League, but sometimes it's also a burden. You must understand this. The bigger the force, the more they give, the more requests they have. The items they ask for will never be ordinary goods. His voice was still cold and his words were harsh. In spite of this, Yun Yang could hear the deep concern in his words. I understand, I really do. I've understood this since the beginning of the transaction with your league. If someone gives me sincerity, I'll return the favor. This is the best way to do it. Aya, no problem. Once Emmy heard that it did not have to use its brain, it relaxed immediately. Its branches and leaves unfurled, its tendrils waving and twisting. Other than satisfaction, it was happy and impatient. After a while, Yun Yang walked out of the meditation room tiredly, but he could not help but feel a sense of joy. How is it? Feng Guohai leaped up. Actually, there was no need to ask. It was obvious from the expression on Yun Yang's face that he had gained a lot. In spite of this, Feng Guohai was too anxious. Despite knowing that it was forbidden, he could not help asking. My personal gain this time is still 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts. Yun Yang smiled and placed the 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts on the table. The three of them remained stoic as they continued to look at him without saying a word. Obviously, the three of them knew that Yun Yang's gains were far more than that. 10 pieces of ethereal amethysts were already priceless, but to Yun Yang and the General Commerce League, they were no longer indispensable items, especially to Yun Yang. There's still a gust of qi left. Yun Yang said, I've sealed it on my arm and brought it out. It's hard for this thing to hold anything, so I'll need you to retrieve it on the spot. It's best if you use it directly. What qi? The three of them asked in unison. It's the qi of vitality. Yun Yang said, the old senior is very satisfied with the trade item I've brought in this time. He's given me a qi of vitality that can restore anyone who has reached the limit of their life to the prime of their youth in a matter of days. The trio's breathing quickened when they heard him. Their 6 eyes widened in unison, as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. Anyone who had reached the limit of their life. These few words seemed repetitive and cumbersome, but they were not repetitive at all. The profound meaning contained within was enough to drive anyone mad. Perhaps the young cultivators in their prime could not fully understand the value of these words, but for the older cultivators who had reached the end of their lives and were at the final moments of their lives, only they could truly feel the preciousness of the qi of vitality. As long as a cultivator was fated to obtain a trace of the legendary qi of vitality, it was enough to extend their lifespan by 10 years. The air that Yun Yang said was sealed in his arm was obviously more than just a sliver. It was the air of vitality that could allow anyone who had reached the end of their lifespan to regain their youthful prime in a matter of days. How could it be a mere sliver? Heaven and earth treasures were valuable and they were undoubtedly precious. However, even if it was the bound of universe's unique heaven and earth treasure, compared to a person's life, it was clear which was more important. Anyone who had reached the end of their life would only choose to prolong their life and not choose heaven and earth treasures. Giving up on the essence of life was akin to neglecting the essentials. This logic could be applied to 99% of the cases in this world. Young Yun, do you think the qi of vitality that you've obtained can be used by a few people at the same time? Gu Jiuxiao asked in a hurried voice. To be honest, I'm not sure myself. Yun Yang said, according to the senior, he sealed my right hand with a divine sense and kept the qi in it. In other words, I'm actually only a temporary vessel for the living. As for how to use it, you guys will have to discuss it yourselves. I can't judge the exact value of this qi either. You guys will have to decide whether it can offset the items that you've provided earlier. The three of them exchanged glances, feeling the thorny issue at the same time. Once they heard about the qi of vitality, all three of them wanted it, wanting to snatch it almost immediately. After all, no one would complain about living too long. This was especially true for cultivators. In spite of it, the three of them were still far from reaching the end of their lifespans. In addition, the three of them were the ones directly responsible for this incident. If they were to use such a treasure without first reporting it, they might not have a place to stand in the General Commerce League in the future. If they were to use the qi of vitality today, they might die a violent death tomorrow. Not to mention the fact that this was a blatant act of embezzlement, it was hard to tell if the matter was true or not. From the moment Yun Yang gave a definite answer, the qi of vitality was already considered the General Commerce League's property. It no longer belonged to him, let alone be used. As for how it should be used and who it should be given to, it would have to wait for the higher-ups to decide. As he wrote this chapter, he suddenly thought of Lady May's Song of the Sunset and repeated the song for the entire night. The more he listened, the sadder he felt. Especially when he watched Lady May's last concert, the scene of that song was even more emotional. I'm a fan of Anita Mui. Although I only like 3 of her songs, Unmatched Youth, Song of the Sunset and Woman Flower, my favorite is the Song of the Sunset. If everyone is interested, you can listen to it. Chapter 971. Since the Chi of Vitality belonged to the League, whoever dared to steal it would be courting death. Report immediately. Feng Guohai was decisive. Let the chief decide who will receive the Chi of Vitality. We'll wait here. We won't interfere. Young brother, how long can the seal on your arm last? Will it weaken with time? Asked Xiao Yushu. As he asked, he stared at Yun Yang's right arm hungrily. He looked as if he wanted to swallow this arm whole, including the skin and the flesh. Yun Yang looked troubled. I don't know either. I wasn't the one who sealed this thing, so how can I say for sure? Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a few days, maybe it's a month? I wouldn't be too surprised even if it dissipates the next moment. What right do I, a junior, have to comment on the elder's magical powers and techniques? The 3 of them were speechless. Fine. His words were as good as not saying anything, but they were also a dead end. Without further ado, Feng Guohai whipped out his communication jade and reported the news immediately. The matter had to be settled as soon as possible. Any delay would lead to more complications, and the consequences would still be severe. Yun Yang could only see the communication jade's light flickering rapidly 3 times in a row. Then it stopped. A moment later, the communication jade lit up as if it was a light, and it kept flashing. Like a lit lamp swaying in the wind, the messages from the other end surged in. Feng Guohai replied to the messages one after another, sweating profusely. It was a clear indication that there was more than one person asking questions on the other end. After a long while, the communication jade finally stopped. Feng Guohai wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and chuckled humorlessly. The chief and deputy chief are troubled by this as well. They're having an urgent discussion and need some time to come to a conclusion. Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao chuckled, looking as if they were not surprised. Of course. There's less meat and more wolves. That's how it should be. The oldest few consecrators in the Merchant Union have basically all reached the end of their lifespans. They're almost at the end of their lifespans, quietly enjoying their remaining years. The one who's most pressing is probably going to die today or tomorrow. Every day that he can live is a day that he's going to die soon. Now that there's suddenly this Chi of Vitality that can revive the dead, there's hope all of a sudden. It's still a big problem to decide who to give it to though. Xiao Yushu sighed. If the few high officials can recover, the League will suddenly have a few more Supreme Saints' combat power. There's even hope for them to ascend to Saint Lord. Not only will the odds of winning the Celestial Luck Banner contest increase, but it'll also be an opportunity for them to stay strong. Yun Yang asked from the side, I say, shouldn't we set a price for this Chi of Vitality? The Chi of Vitality that I've obtained this time is mostly because the item in exchange is outstanding and has pleased the senior greatly. That's why he's bestowed this item. I dare not guarantee that I'll have such a spiritual item every time. Let's make this clear first, so please set a price for the League. Don't worry, the Chi of Vitality that I have is already your League's. What I'm thinking of is to have a rough standard of measurement in the future. Only when both parties are satisfied will we be able to work together happily. Feng Guohai chuckled dryly. Of course I understand this. Young brother's Chi of Vitality is a priceless treasure to us cultivators. No matter how we value it, it won't be lower than the total value of the item we've brought. However, the specific valuation will have to be decided by the people from the headquarters. We can only wait patiently now. His words were clear. Yun Yang's proposed valuation was beyond his authority and he could not comment on it. However, it also showed that the value of the Chi of Vitality was indeed extraordinary. It would at least not be lower than 400,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces. Brother Yun, can I take a look at your arm? Xiao Yushu suddenly requested. Yun Yang had expected this, so he extended his arm without hesitation. Xiao Yushu and the other 2 grabbed it together. Yun Yang was shocked and said in a strange voice, Be careful, don't break the seal. The 3 of them were embarrassed for a moment before they carefully lifted Yun Yang's arm to feel it. It's an expert skill, truly unfathomable. Xiao Yushu clicked his tongue in admiration and said, To seal a tangible object in your arm with the power of a divine sense that is almost invisible and intangible, this is already a top-notch technique. Not to mention that the chi of vitality did not leak out at all, nor did it fuse with your physical body, but this is truly an unimaginable technique. What's more, I can clearly feel the pure chi of vitality within with my deific consciousness, but it doesn't affect Brother Yun's ability to control his arm at all. Such a skill is simply unimaginable. Gu Jiuxiao and Feng Guohai shared the same sentiment and expressed their admiration. Putting aside the fact that his cultivation was unfathomable, just this sealing technique alone was enough to make one gasp in amazement. Although such a seal could be broken by anyone with some cultivation base, the three of them knew that it was impossible for them to create a seal like this. Not only could they not do it, but they did not even understand the principle of the seal's construction. At the very least, none of the sealing skills that they knew of could achieve such a result. What they could confirm now was that there was a gust of chi of vitality lingering between Yun Yang's wrist and below his elbow. It was palpable and the chi of vitality that was about to burst out, but it did not leak at all. It was a rare and precious feat. It's the spirit's grave indeed. It's an unparalleled existence indeed. The trio's admiration was overflowing. That night Feng Guohai and the others stayed. They had no choice but to do so. This was an important matter, so they had to wait for the headquarters to come and receive the chi of vitality. As for going to the headquarters with Yin Yang? No matter how daring they were, they would never dare to take such a risk. At night. It's not our first time here. Why does it feel so oppressive this time? It doesn't feel like an illusion. Gu Jiuxiao felt uneasy all over. He felt like someone was spying on him at all times, as if he was naked and exposed to the other party's eyes. This kind of feeling was like a thorn in his back. Coincidentally, Feng Guohai and Xiao Yushu had the same feeling as well, which indirectly proved that Gu Jiuxiao's feeling was correct. In spite of that, what kind of expert could the newly established residents of Nine Supremes have? Is it really not an illusion? Is it because we're suspecting ghosts? Feng Guohai asked in a muffled voice. Chapter 972. The trio no longer felt anything out of the ordinary, subconsciously assuming that they had misjudged due to the immense pressure they had been under recently. However, there was no reason for the three of them to have the same misconception. At midnight, the chief instructor of the residents of Nine Supremes began to exercise his authority again. Other than Yun Yang, the other 8 came together, sealing their senses and only retaining their mystical chi as they engaged in an extreme battle of fists and kicks. Beat them to death, all of you. If you don't want to kill others, then be killed by others. Dong Qitian said faintly, by tomorrow morning, I must see at least 4 of you half dead. This concerns your ranking in the future. It doesn't matter if you choose to be merciful. Having said that, Dong Qitian swung his arms and went back to sleep. He had not been able to lie down and sleep properly for more than 4,000 years. Now that he had finally escaped, he still had to babysit for these kids. Naturally, he would not stand or sit if he could lie down. When Dong Qitian laid on the bed, the moment his back touched the soft mattress, a sense of bliss and contentment rose within him. So what if one's cultivation base is unparalleled? Dong Qitian sighed. The so-called feeling of bliss is still the most realistic feeling of an ordinary person. The higher one's cultivation base, the more one can abstain from eating and drink, but they lose the bliss of an ordinary person's appetite. Cultivating in seclusion for months and years without sleep will deprive them of the bliss of an ordinary person's sleep. Although one can live a long life and live forever in this world, how can one enjoy the bliss of an ordinary person's children and grandchildren? Even if one is an old monster who has lived for tens of thousands of years, his entire life is filled with welcoming and sending off people, experiencing the prosperity of the universe and even the rise and fall of the world, will there really be the bliss of an ordinary person's emotions? After tens of thousands of years, the number of children and grandchildren would be more than 10 million. With so many children and grandchildren, which one of them would be able to stay in his heart forever? Without the concern of his family, he would be indifferent to everything like strangers. No matter how many children and grandchildren he has, how can he have a warm home? Dong Qitian lay on the bed, appreciating the softness of the mattress, but he could not fall asleep. Looking at the bright moon outside the window, his thoughts tumbled and fluctuated. For a moment he was actually lost in his own thoughts. I remember a saying from many years ago, if you wish to ascend to the heavens you must first be a man. But now there are cultivators everywhere. Who is being a serious person? Puff puff puff. Throughout the entire night, Feng Guohai and the other 2 could only hear the sound of flesh being struck in the training field. It was endless, coming one after another. Then the screams became louder and louder, becoming more and more mournful. The three of them were so noisy that they couldn't rest at all. They put on their clothes and went out to watch. However, the three of them shook their heads in disdain at the sight of it. On the field, the 8 people were attacking each other like mad tigers. It was one thing for their punches to land on each other. But everyone was running around like headless flies, and they hit whoever they caught. They had no target at all, and there was no order to speak of. It was simply a mess, and it was too horrible to look at. There were 2 meanings to the phrase unbearable to look at here. The first was the three's evaluation of the 8 people's strategy and tactics, which was unbearable to look at and unbearable to look at. As for the latter, it was utterly unbearable to look at. Every single one of them was dealing with 7 enemies at the same time. They were attacking others and being attacked by 7 people at the same time. All of them were gritting their teeth, their faces were bruised and swollen, and the ground was already drenched in blood. Everyone was constantly being knocked down and then continuously getting up. Everyone's attacks were forceful, a testament to their extraordinary mystical chi cultivation base. However, their attacks were aimless. It was as if everyone was deaf and blind, unable to sense anything at all. They were even worse than an ordinary man who had only learned a few days of martial arts. This kind of training method is really unique. Feng Guohai frowned. It's probably the first time I've seen something like this in my life. It's also the first time I've seen something like this in my life. Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao shook their heads as well. Such training is a waste of resources and talent. How is there any efficiency to speak of? They shook their heads as they watched, but Shi Wuchen and the others who were in the midst of the battle were slowly gaining a new feeling. In the beginning, this state of facing the enemy was indeed very uncomfortable. He couldn't see, hear, or feel. He could only attack blindly, purely relying on his martial arts instincts to attack. But later on he gradually found a way to use it. That was the 7th sense. Relying on their innate sense of danger as a cultivator, the 8 of them began to have the tendency to dodge and evade. Their attacks and movements had a certain order to them as well. They were no longer fighting blindly and purely based on luck. As a result, their injuries became more and more severe. In this state, it was as if all of them were sleepwalking. They would softly attack and greet their opponents. Only when they truly came into contact with their opponents would they exert their strength. Under this attack mode, 8 out of 10 times, they would be able to hit their opponents solidly without any tricks. Fortunately, the group's cultivation base was about the same, so there was no need to worry about anyone actually killing anyone. The first night of training was known as the Night of Purgatory. The entire night passed and all 8 of them without exception were lying on the ground in a severe coma, unconscious. When dawn broke, Yunyang came out and dragged the 8 of them into the room. He stuffed a pill into each of their mouths and then slammed the door shut. He turned and left, paying no more attention to them. In the afternoon, the 8 of them woke up one after another, cultivating to recover and repair their physical bodies. As the 8 of them circulated their energy, they cursed loudly. Which son of a b** beat me up like this? There's no brotherly bond at all. Don't you king know how to be gentler? Did you go easy on me? It's not the same. Ouch, it hurts. It doesn't matter if you use more strength in a sparring match, but I just want to ask, who king kicked my crotch? An exasperated voice groaned, I'm still king virgin? You bastards. I don't even know if I can still use it. You think you're the only one? Another voice had obviously just caught his breath, his voice quivering in pain. My crotch, it's about to break. Who hasn't suffered it before? Another person gloated. Who's to blame if you don't know how to move your leg when your crotch is kicked? Use your thigh to take the hit, idiot. With a loud bang, Dong Qitian sauntered in, his gait unsteady. Chapter 973. Listening to all of you talking so energetically, it looks like you didn't really use all your strength last night and didn't reach your limits. Otherwise, how could you still have the strength to curse? Young people indeed, their recovery is amazing. Looks like I can add more. Training is only effective when you push yourself to your limits. Dong Qitian snorted. How did we not reach our limits? We gave it our all last night. We couldn't even move a little bit. You're wise, chief instructor. We really gave it our all last night. Our limbs are still sore and we feel like we've been hollowed out. Then let me ask you, did you have any epiphany during the battle? Or should I say, epiphany? This seems like, I don't think I felt anything, just pain, other than excruciating pain. What else can you feel? Nothing, Dong Qitian nodded. Very good, very good. No epiphany? That's great. Since none of you have any epiphany, we'll continue tonight. We'll wait until you do. With that he turned to leave. Only one sentence came from afar. I need to see a few broken bones tomorrow morning. The room was filled with wails. No, today is bad enough. Why do we have to continue? Oh my God. Is this training? This is murder. Is this the residence of 9 Supremes or hell? Spare me, help me. It was a pity that Dong Qiqian was long gone. Even if he had heard them, he would not have paid them any heed. This chief instructor's cultivation base is actually quite good. Gu Jiuxiao smacked his lips and said, he's a saint level 4, almost the ability of an ordinary sex leader. I wonder where this kid got him from. Not bad indeed, but he looks unfamiliar. He should be a newly ascended ace cultivator. Xiao Yushu stroked his beard reservedly. A saint level 4 is indeed a worthy expert, especially in the residence of 9 Supremes now. Feng Guohai nodded, taking advantage of his seniority, his gaze pleased. Dong Qiqian walked past from afar, sneering in his heart since a long time ago. You bunch of idiots only know that you're a 4th level saint on the surface. Of course, with my cultivation you can only see what I want you to see. As for the rest, humph. It had to be said that the General Commerce Alliance's actions were rather swift. However, at midnight on the 3rd night, a peculiar sound of breaking wind suddenly arose, like the roar of a dragon or the roar of a tiger wreaking havoc in the sky. A voice that shook the heavens spoke, the Commerce League is here. Where is Feng Guohai? Before he could finish his words, a powerful aura surged through the air. The residence of 9 Supremes was protected by a great formation, so it was not greatly affected by the pressure. However, all the forests within 100 miles of the mountain guarding formation prostrated in unison due to the pressure, like courtiers paying homage to their king. In his room, Dong Qiqian only lifted his eyelids lightly, rolled his eyes, turned over and went back to sleep. He did not care at all. Yunyang did not delay activating the mountain guarding formation. 5 silhouettes landed lightly like birds in the sky. The one in the lead was muscular and stocky. Who else could it be but Lang Fantian? Yunyang, however, did not recognize any of the 4 elders behind him. They were all strangers. With a glance, Yunyang saw that 2 of them had long white hair. They were hunched and emaciated, their faces filled with wrinkles. They were covered in age spots and even their eyes were murky without a hint of brilliance. Their auras were even weaker, with only a slight flow of breath every few moments. They looked old and frail. Perhaps, their condition was even worse than what he saw because they had flown here with the support of the other 2. If the 2 of them had flown over on their own, the consumption of this journey would have been enough to further shorten their remaining lifespans. They would have easily run out of energy and would have breathed their last. As for the other 2 old men who were supporting them, although their conditions were slightly better than the first 2, they still appeared to be old and clumsy. They were also old people. Yunyang flew out to welcome them personally. Brother Yun. Ah. Brother Yun, we meet again. Lang Fantian strode forward to greet him passionately and shook Yunyang's hand. Brother, you've worked hard. You've worked hard. From the looks of it, they were like blood brothers who had been separated for years, suddenly reuniting in a war-torn street, overjoyed. The surprise, the excitement, Yunyang, who was directly involved, was taken aback. Cough. Vice Chief Lang, you don't have to be so courteous. Of course. Ah. Another hearty guffaw ensued. Lang Fantian lowered his voice and said, I didn't expect the item you've made this time to be something that even deities can't get their hands on. This, wonderful. Yunyang coughed. Of course. Can you let go of my hand first? He thought to himself, this air of vitality is only the lowest grade item Emmy has. Its spiritual energy, Qi of Tao, innate purple Qi and spiritual energy of vitality, haven't been touched yet. You're already overjoyed. I'll have to adjust my plan then. How can I not make use of the rare item I have? Come, let me introduce you first. These 2 are the General Commerce League's Elders of Worship, Heaven Sword and Earth Saber. Since the General Commerce League upgraded to the middle-class Celestial Luck banner 20,000 years ago, both of you have been the League's elders. Throughout these years, you've risked your life for the League and made countless contributions. You're the League's greatest contributors. Lang Fantian pointed at the 2 old men who were about to turn into a pile of bones and die at any moment. The 2 old men straightened themselves with effort, their murky eyes locked onto Yunyang. I'm Heaven Sword, Song Changgong. I'm Earth Saber, Li Yisin. The 2 old men sighed together. We don't live up to our names anymore. We can't even lift our sabers and swords now. Heaven's Sword and Earth Saber's names will only make us laugh if we say them. The other two said respectfully, Seniors, your reputation is unparalleled. The General Commerce League's achievement today is all thanks to your hard work. No one can compare to you. These two are also the League's guardians, Wan Qinglu and Bai Yushi, Lang Fantian introduced. It's an honor to meet you all. Yun Yang bowed repeatedly. I've heard so much about you. Your names are like thunder to my ears. It's my honor to meet you all today. Lang Fantian rolled his eyes. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.